First, I'd like to thank Steve Hansen from this community for coming tonight to live stream and take the meeting. So thank you, Steve. We appreciate that. Okay, Jane, would you take the roll, please?
Penny Brista. Here. Chris Freeman. Here. Connie Hughesby. Here. Clint Moses.
Here.
Gabriel Swanson. Here. Charlie Schneider.
Here.
David Starr.
Here.
Jim Swanson.
Here.
Tricia Thompson. Here.
Okay, we have a quorum to conduct business. Move on to agenda item 3, agenda order approval revision. Does anybody have anything for tonight? Okay, moving on to recommendations and accommodations. I do have one this evening. The Board of Education of the School District of the Menomonie area recognizes Amy Webb for her work on creating 2 8th grade virtual graduation celebrations at the Menomonie Middle School. Ms. Webb offered her leadership, creativity, and a great deal of time and effort to create these videos to highlight many of the accomplishments and talents of the class of 2024. So thank you, Amy. We appreciate that. I just wanted to mention tonight that in accordance with the guidelines from the Dunn County Health Department, in-person attendance tonight has been limited to 25 people. It's anticipated we'll have up to 14 spaces available for members of the public. The meeting is live streamed at, we have a link available on our website. It's too long for me to read off. And I also want to mention that community communications were allowed to be offered virtually. We did not have any requests for virtual communications. If you'd still like to provide written communications to the board, you're more than welcome to do so. There are a number of letters to the board that have been included in board docs for the board members to see. So if you want to look at them at some point in time. Did I miss anything, Joe?
No, I think you got it.
Okay. So I think that takes care of community communications. We'll move on to board member I'm sorry, Amy.
I don't know if you all saw it, it didn't come to this venue, but there was an email around noonish from Gene Yard. And you may have seen it, came straight to board members.
Addressed to the board, yeah. Did everybody see that?
I did not see it, so if a board member wants to share it with us, we'd be happy to load it in with the rest of them.
Thanks, Amy, good catch. I didn't realize Joe was not included in that, so, thank you.
So you want somebody to read it?
Just email it to Joe, be great, so.
I think there was a second one that's not included too, because we get 2 of them this afternoon. There was one that came through like 12:33, and I think there was another, so just make sure. Yeah, that was the other one I saw.
Who was the other one from?
Last name's Ballard.
Yeah,
Okay. Yeah, so
just make sure those.
Oh, yeah, that one too. I forgot about that one.
Okay.
Yeah, I'll make sure you get them.
in fact, if you just want to email them to Jamie, Jamie can upload them. That'd be fine.
Jamie.
That'd be great. Thank you.
Thank you. Anything else? Okay, board members, superintendent communications, board members? Any, Jim?
We've had 2 TIF meetings in this last month. Involved one district right over here where the quick trip is and stuff. And the other one was District 12, which is part of the industrial park. And it just basically involved moving funds from one to the other and changing some boundaries. It really didn't change any status for taxes or anything like that. So we had a 2-part meeting, first to propose the changes and the second to vote on them after public comment. So that's all taken care of.
Is there any controversy, Jim, on those at all?
No. That was basically, you can't have a TIF losing money. And one was losing money, one was making money, so we transferred from one to the other. And then they also discovered that they had drawn the boundaries wrong for one of them. And so they had to change the boundaries and had to approve that, so.
Okay, thanks for serving on that committee.
Yeah.
Okay.
Actually, can I raise my hand first? Tanya, Clint, Dave, myself, Joe, and Mr. Drake, and the staff at the high school were all involved in the graduation ceremony, which was very different, but I think it went very, very well. in regards to what we could work with. And it was just really great to be a part of that, and congratulations to the class of 2020.
Here. Thank you.
Graduates, so.
Yes, I did. Tanya.
Just Christmas in July was held at the high school, so thanks for letting the organizations United Way and Options for Women use that. So they're able to distribute out to 142 families, gifts and clothes, so it's really, it was much appreciated to have that.
Very nice, thank you. Chris.
I got two this week, one from Margaret Bryce, and she put together a really great letter that addresses the cost to the district of voucher program. And she sent a letter to all of our state reps, and I think it would be helpful if I shared that with the board, because it's so nicely done, like laid out with like graphs, charts, impact, and this year's impact is $64,000. That's a big deal for our district on those vouchers going to St. Joe's. So that was good communication. And then this one I'm excited about. Do you guys know Dr. Robert Ballard? He discovered the Titanic and like Bismarck, and like he's a kind of big ocean explorer dude with the National Geographic with Soul. Well, anyway, I emailed him last February about that homework helpers program we were doing. And I asked him if he would be interested in coming to focus on math and science in our middle school. And he doesn't often, I mean, he's kind of a hefty speaking price, but he is right now on board the Nautilus in San Pedro, California. And he would love to speak as an uplift for our students in math and science this fall, and maybe live stream to their homes or live stream into an event in the middle school. So that's super cool. And he's available anytime now from September to December, and he would love to live feed with our students. So that's out there, and maybe we could work together with our middle school staff and science staff to give a unique opportunity for these kids to learn about oceanographic exploration, but also about the effects of global warming, which we talk about frequently, on our ocean world. So those two.
On the email that you got from Margaret, did you share that with Joe?
I just opened it before, but I'll
Okay.
share with everyone, but I didn't see it. It actually came a week ago.
Okay.
So I emailed her and said, thank you very much, and I said I would bring it up tonight, and I would share it with the rest of the board.
Okay, yeah. And then the middle school project with is it Dr. Ballard?
Yeah,
If you talk to the,
just got it right before. I was super thrilled. I haven't seen him since his son's so small, so it's been a long time.
yeah, I think it's great. I really do, Chris. I just worked through the administration and stuff on that too.
These are just communications.
Just so everybody's in
That's
the
all the other
loop.
ones.
Just so everybody's in the loop, okay? Anybody else?
I have a couple of things. WASP is doing a commitment on equity, racial and ethnic equity. That's Thursday night from 7:30 to 9 o'clock. I believe it's probably Zoom or some kind of webinar. It's free, you can register. And then on August 13th, there is Cindy Carnahan. She's a professor at Eagle River Falls, and she is doing a Facebook Live on racism at the public library from 6 to 7. And that's on Thursday, August 13th.
Okay,
Just some things in case you're interested.
thanks, Amy. And I forgot to mention at the beginning of the meeting too, to make sure when you're speaking, to talk into the microphones, especially since it's a virtual meeting. And so don't be afraid to pull them close and use them good tonight so that the members of the public can hear us when we speak. So thank you. Any other board members?
Or why not, I'll brag. The Sorta Dunn County Fair, where our kids were able to show their animals, went very well. It's a good time. It's kind of somewhat back to a little bit more normalcy. It was incredibly hot, so I'm a huge exhaustion after that, but I think it was quite enjoyable. It was a little weird not having obviously grandparents in the public there, but it was virtually streamed over WRDN on a Duran, which was very nice for family to observe. And then the other thing, kind of a community calendar thing, Chief Atkinson's doing a talk at Wilson Park tomorrow night. I believe at 6:30, correct me if I'm wrong, 6:30 or 7, is that 7? On police reform and some of the issues that the police departments are facing across the country right now. So Chief Atkinson's got pretty good experience, has done some teaching, I believe, at Erber as well, and sociology and criminal justice. So that should be interesting, and the public is invited to it, so.
And I believe Steve will be there as well, correct? Thank you.
Yes.
Yeah, you can watch it. You can also watch it. I think it's either live stream or it's gonna be taped, so you can watch it later if you don't wanna go. And they suggest you bring your own chair, your own bug spray, and a mask.
Okay. Okay, thank you. Any other board members? By the way, Chris, I think it's a great opportunity. Don't get me wrong. I just want to make sure that everybody's in the loop on it. So, thank you. Joe?
Okay, Penny already mentioned the diploma presentation we had at Menomonie High School. I received a lot of positive feedback from parents. It was really something, it was a good opportunity for us to practice some of the mitigation techniques that we'll be talking about tonight with our plans for next year. I think people did a good job at that, and I think because of that, it was a safe event, and that was our number one goal. But it's also really neat to see the seniors come across the stage, get their diploma covers, and a little bittersweet in a way. We really enjoyed the regular graduation, but I think everyone did a great job trying to make it special. So I applaud Mr. Drake and his staff for their great work on that. Other than that, I did present to the morning Rotary group last Thursday, 7 a.m. at Wilson Park, and that was a really nice experience. We have so many people in the community that are interested in what we're doing in terms of trying to reopen our schools, and I heard over and over how much agreement there was in terms of the importance of having kids in school with their teachers, but also a lot of concern about how can we do that in a safe and responsible way. And I just want to say thank you to the Morning Rotary Club. They donated a book to the Menomonie Public Library. They do that for all of their speakers. So if you ever go to the library and read the book, The Wolf Who Fell Out of the Book, that's the one. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Joe. Any other comments? Okay, we'll move on to the personnel consent agenda. Action to approve personnel actions. Is there a motion?
So
Amy, a second. Clint? Okay, the motion is, we have two actions: resignation of Caitlin Perlmeyer, who was the school counselor at Downsville Nap Elementary Schools, effective immediately, and the employment of Ashton Keene, world language teacher at the Menomonie High School, effective August 18th, 2010. Any discussion? Okay, that's all, Jamie. Oh, I'm sorry, Jim.
Just question, world language, what languages, there's a lot of languages in Spanish.
Spanish.
Okay.
Thanks, everyone. It's not French. It could have been French, but it's Spanish.
Spanish teacher. Okay, let's vote. Okay, motion carries by unanimous vote. On to the action agenda, item number 3A, action to approve the SDMA Education for Employment Plan. Do we have a motion? Charlie, is there a second? Penny? This was something that we discussed at our last board meeting. I don't know if there's anything you want to add, Joe, or?
No, I think there were a couple of questions that came up at the meeting that Brian answered through his correspondence with the board, so it should be ready to roll.
Board members, any questions? Chris?
Just adding to this going forward, I got to thinking about,
Make sure you use your mic.
so I got to thinking about what our kids need to know about the employment reality that they're heading into. And I was looking through the protocols in PowerPoint, they're great, but it seems to me they're missing I hate to say a reality check, but I mean, there is a reality that what's the minimum wage in Wisconsin, $7.25 an hour. Poverty rate in Dunn County is about 25%. And there's a lot of good reasons why they want to think about their education as like an avenue out of that kind of tragic fate for a lot of people, especially who grow up here and go to school here and then work in that environment, because we can also think that their future employment is also tied to political realities too. Like, why is our minimum wage $7.25? And what does poverty look like, or what does family force income that's living instead of 25 an hour, what does that translate into? And that's just above the poverty line. So thinking about the economic reality that they face in Dunn County would be super important for them to get their heads around at a pretty early age. It's not just that they're training for jobs, but we also want to think about what kind of jobs our county and community provides for those kids as well. So just something to think about going forward.
Thanks, Chris. Anything else? Okay, Jamie, so. Okay, motion passes 9-0. Action item 3B, action to approve year-end budget transfers. We did discuss this last meeting as well. Joe, if you want to recap that?
Yeah, I just want to note that after the last discussion, we did change the recommendation to transfer $1 million from Fund 10 to Fund 46. Essentially, we're prepaying the contribution to Fund 46, the Capital Improvement Fund, going into next year. That'll provide more flexibility for Fund 10. It still allows us to capture a fair amount of state aid, and it also allows us to continue meeting our fund balance goals, knowing that it's very likely that for the first time in a long time, it's likely we'll end up in the red this year with all the COVID-related expenses.
Anybody have any questions on that? We talked about
I'm
that.
gonna perhaps open a big can of worms, but do you foresee any changes from the legislature in the school funding formula, Joe, for next year? I mean, I would assume there's gonna be some big ones.
I don't anticipate any changes to the formula. How much is put in the pie from which the formula is fed, I could anticipate something like that. A lot of it will depend on upcoming elections and such.
Okay, do we have a motion to approve?
I'll make a motion.
Penny, second? Clint?
Sorry.
Clint beat you, just because I was looking that way. Any other discussion? Okay, Jamie, let's vote. Okay, motion passes 9-0. Action item 3C, action to approve addition to staffing plan for 2020, 2021. Do I have a motion to approve? Jim, is there a second?
Second.
Amy? Any discussion? We talked again also this at length.
So last meeting, we talked about the idea of trying to do whatever we can to keep kids kindergarten through 6th grade in school for in-person instruction with physical distancing as needed. In the event that we go to a stricter level of mitigation efforts, we will need to go to an alternating enrollment plan in grades 7 through 12. With some additional teaching staff, however, we do think that by reutilizing some spaces in our elementary schools and reconfiguring some things at the middle school, that we can offer in-person instruction grades K through 6. Last meeting, we talked of hiring up to 20 teachers. In looking at the classrooms, I had a bunch of tours, had another one today at Wakanda, and I appreciate the help that I had on those with the principals, custodians, and other people. Right now, the recommendation is to hire 15 additional teachers. That also provides a little flexibility, knowing that it's likely that we'll have some teachers that need to miss work more often than in previous years, whether it be for self-quarantine or illness or exhibiting other symptoms that would require them not to come to work. So it's very possible that we could come back in the fall and ask for those 5 additional teachers that we talked about last month or last meeting. But right now, we feel comfortable starting with 15 additional teachers and 7 additional custodians. At the time board docs went live, we were also planning to hire 1 supervisory aide for each school bus route. I went to Menomonie Transportation this morning and was working on the transportation plan with the people at Menomonie Transportation. We do not feel that 1 supervisory aide will be needed for each bus route at this time. We are planning to have supervisory aides on the 4K routes. However, with what we're learning about screening and our really an inability to screen as the students come on the bus, that they did not think that a supervisory aide was going to be necessary. So my recommendation has actually changed since this came out last Thursday. We still are asking for the 15 additional teachers and the 7 additional custodians, but are no longer asking for supervisory aides. Those will be handled through our contract with Menomonie Transportation as needed.
Okay, before we move on, Chris, so we'll have to change our motion then?
I think that would be proper, yes.
So would the maker and the second of that like to offer a friendly amendment, or?
Sure, I can do that.
Sure. Okay,
I will amend my motion to include all of the written language up to the point of additional custodians, put a period there, and then everything after the end of the one for school, just cross that out. That should take care of the
and
problem.
Amy, you're good with
And I'll
that?
second that.
Okay, I just want to read the motion one more time then. As discussed at the board meeting held on July 13th, the board will be asked to approve an addition to the staffing plan for the 2020-2021 school year. The administration is requesting the board to approve a motion that adds up to 15 additional teachers and 7 additional custodians. So, just so we're all clear. Chris?
Yeah, just having had some experience on the bus routes, and from what I understood, and I might be wrong about this, from what I understood, we're going to be masked in distance on the bus.
We're planning to be masked. We're going to be distanced the best we can, but it's not going to be physical distancing. It's not going to be close to 6 feet. We are going to try to do cohort seating though the best we can as well.
I'm worried that the school bus driver, whose attention will be focused on the road, is not going to be capable of maintaining that type of order on the bus. Like, I wouldn't be able, I can barely do that when I'm driving my kids when
Sure.
I'm sending them to the store. So think about how a bus driver would handle that, and that's a really important contact point that we want to try to have at least some control over before they get to the school. So I personally am uncomfortable with not having added aid for the bus drivers, unless the bus company is planning on providing that in each bus, and just not us hiring an extra person. You know what I mean? I might have listed that part too.
No, they're planning on having an aide on the 4K bus. And I said the same thing. I said, you know, if you feel like this is going to be a distraction, I would rather have an aide on the bus. And they felt that the way the rules are written, we communicate and market those rules well with the parents. They're also anticipating that there'll be less people riding than normal. You know, and I've heard that too, that a lot of parents are making arrangements to transport on their own. So I think that's something we could continue to study and look at. I certainly would not be opposed to having aides on the bus, but based on the discussions we had this morning, I don't feel it's necessary to start the year.
Follow up?
Yeah. I would trust your original instinct on that. Like, you've got a pretty good sense of like the overall bird's eye view of what that would look like. So if you were uncomfortable at the beginning, unless there was some substantial evidence that provided they will be able to maintain that, I would be really hesitant for you not to go with your gut instinct on that.
Well, my gut instinct was based on the idea that we'd be screening kids as they came onto the bus with thermometers, and we're not going to be able to do that. So I obviously we weren't going to have the bus drivers do that, and I'm kind of going off the recommendation that the bus company gave me, and I trust those guys. They really care a lot about our kids and our community. They know their business better than I do. So at this point, I agree with their recommendation.
Jim, you were first, I think?
No, Zane,
Oh,
Zane has a hand or somebody over here.
Okay, then Tricia.
Okay, I just want to say that you had mentioned somewhere in your code report or in the plan for returning to school or opening school, that parents that wanted to could, in fact, you were asking it outright, if you could get parents transport to make the buses less crowded,
Yes.
that would be a good thing. And I like that idea. The only thing that worries me is the haves and have-nots. You know, there'll be some people that'll have to ride the bus because they have no other way. Their parents may work and they need to get on the bus themselves. So I do worry about that. You know, that they may have a choice to ride to school. That's all I'm gonna say.
Tricia?
Are bus drivers going to be masked?
Yes.
Oh,
Yep, the plan is that everyone on the bus will be masked.
Okay.
And hand sanitizer will be applied anytime someone enters the bus. And families will sit together, also gonna try to cohort by building. classroom if possible. And for instance, for the athletics part of it, and then the plan is still in development. Again, we just met this morning and we're reviewing drafts of the plan. For athletics, transportation, if there are any athletics, the same people would be sitting in proximity to each other on the way to the event and home from the event. We talked about bus capacity too. Many of our rural routes, they may be able to physically distance pretty well for much of the route. But then as the route gets closer to town and the buses get fuller and fuller and fuller, that's where the physical distancing will fall apart a little bit. So they also talk about ventilation. Obviously if the weather's nice, windows will be open. They talked about the hatch that they have at the top of the bus, and they already got plans for keeping that hatch open and keeping the fan blowing more than it typically would. So they're putting a lot of thought into the plan, and I appreciate that.
Amy?
Is there be up to the bus driver if there's no aid to make sure that the students are sitting in the cohorts and are diddling, so forth?
A lot of that's going to be done in more collaboration with the students, trying to educate the students. And again, it will matter what part of the route it's on. As the rural pickups happen, I think that will be more possible. But when we go in town and we transfer between buildings, for instance, at the end of the day, that's a real pinch point. Many times it's 3 to a seat. We talked about trying to add an extra bus or change it a little bit. So at the most we have 2 to a seat, things like that.
But the bus driver is not responsible for making sure those cohorts, somebody else will be, like somebody will make like a map of the bus before school starts, or how is that gonna work?
We'll be communicating with families and with the kids.
Okay.
Yeah, but no, I don't, the bus drivers are not gonna stop and keep a seat in charge or anything like that.
Just kind of follow up, my concern ties in with Amy's too, is kind of who's gonna orient these kids on the first day of school as to what the procedures are and stuff. I know they do a little bit to begin with, but, and it's experienced in the past without COVID, this first day or week is kind of chaos anyway. It's my understanding that the House are also gonna make adjustments to the routes, which they do every year anyway, but look at where the heavier ones are and try to spread some of those out a little bit. I had another point too, but I don't.
Clint, if I could speak to that one, we talked a bit about that, and they're gonna look for opportunities, but they said not to anticipate much change to the routes. And you're right, there's a lot of orientation the first few days. In fact, a lot of times our buses run quite late the first week of school because the bus drivers are doing a lot of orientation with the students.
I will say, I know our bus driver runs a pretty firm control on that bus, so if she tells the kids where to sit or something like that, she does it all the time for disciplinary stuff or whatever.
And again, I'm not opposed to adding supervisory aids if that's something the bus company feels is needed. Because again, I don't want to see distraction for the driver. And if that's the case, certainly we'll support that, but that's not the recommendation today.
It's something that's open in the future if necessary.
If these supervisory aides, would they just be basically riding on the bus to and from school and then the rest of the day have the same hours as the bus driver basically, or would they be doing things in the school during the day?
Well, the 4K routes are a little bit different. They would be Menomonie transportation employees.
Okay.
If we want to provide our own aids on top of that, it will be very difficult to staff.
Okay.
But it'll just be part-time, just while the bus route is running, correct? If there were bus supervisory aids on the buses?
If we could find them, yes.
Yeah. Chris?
Okay, so, I'm just getting a sense of what's going on. Some of these buses have 3 kids sitting next to each other in the seats.
In typical years, yes.
Yeah, so is there any way that we can put in a provisor so that we're checking on not only the level of COVID activity we have in the county, which should impact whether or not we want to have an extra bus on that route, but also monitoring the student ridership? Will they do that every day for us and give us a report?
No, they won't provide that kind of reporting every day. And, it sounds simple just to add another bus and add another driver, but, they have contingency plans. They're just hoping to be able to staff the whole fleet. And we actually talked about contingency plans in the event that they're not able to staff enough routes. We may have to do an emergency communication and cancel a route on a particular day. I mean, they have a backup to the backup to the backup, but they're gonna be screening their drivers when they report to work in the morning. They're gonna be doing temperature screenings, they're gonna be doing health questions. And it's very possible that they could have a morning where they won't have enough drivers. So the idea of just adding additional routes is not something that is very feasible. We're hopeful that in the event that we need to add a shuttle route between the buildings at the end of the day, that's something that's in the plan. But in terms of, going to half capacity or something, it's just really not feasible.
I will say, I know our son is driving, and personally, I don't have any concerns, but I can certainly see in certain families where it'd be issues. I do think that we're gonna have more, as we talked about in the beginning, a lot more families that will be dropping their students off at school than compared to normal. So, Jim?
Do they anticipate just having enough bus drivers? I mean, with shutting down last year, did they lose a lot of employees, or are they coming back? What is their status on that?
I was told that they're fully staffed right now,
Okay.
and they have a backup to the backup to the backup, so they have at least 3 extras.
Okay.
But they can't be relied upon to use up their backup drivers for regular routes.
Chris, and then Clinton.
Okay, so I'm getting a sense that it's pretty impractical to try and manage the bus situation unless we have help from the community. I know that I think it was just discussed that we've got, we at least publicized the fact that it'd be helpful to get more kids off the bus to make that bus more manageable. Could we do and I don't know exactly what's going to publicize that, but maybe we should ramp that up a little bit in terms of thinking about how the community can help the school district instead of how the school district can help the community. Being very specific about trying to figure out what do we need. And it seems to me that this is a place where we could use some community help in transporting kids in and out of school, which brings up the conga line at the middle school. When you're dropping off your kids, which can be extensive, but I imagine it's going to be like twice as long this year as it was last year. So I don't know if we have any other routes in and out of that for parents that get dropped off kids or not, but that was just another concern that I had.
It's gonna be a challenge, and I can tell you that Mr. Betcher and his team have done a great job making that more efficient. It was actually much worse a few years ago. And it's gonna be a whole other issue too, is, we're gonna have a certain limit of time that people can drop kids off. So people are gonna have to have patience. But if you think about it, if you go to a concert, you go to a Brewer game, you go to a Menomonie football game, I mean, when anytime you go to a large event like that, you have to expect patience, and you have to expect that, you can't just show up, drive in the lot 5 minutes before the bell rings and expect to get out of there. People have to plan ahead, and I realize it's easier said than done, but people are gonna have to exhibit some patience, for sure.
I'll keep it brief. I do think it'd be good to definitely have a contingency in there for parents to basically help out, because if this happens, it's gonna happen fairly quickly, and it's gonna be on a case by case as far as how out of control the bus gets and the age group and the makeup of the kids that are on there. I will tell you, without giving names or anything like that, the number of bus drivers that are coming back to work this year are right up there with normal. In fact, I would say this is a better year than normal for them. They've got some new hires that have come through and just want to get back to work. And I will tell you, every member of the Howe family now has their CDL, so that will help as a backup as well, I think. So rest assured, I think they'll be able to meet the challenge. The biggest thing I'd say is the parents, just making sure we've got them on deck if needed.
Yeah, I don't know that that's in our plan, having paras on deck, but we certainly will add staffing if we need to.
Tricia?
I was just gonna say that the reason I was thinking about travel or transporting my kids is so that it just takes a little bit of pressure off of the buses. And so I like Chris's idea in that if we could, I think there are other parents like me that just are able to, so we just might as well do it and then take some pressure off it if we could, encourage that. I get, not everybody's able to do it, but.
Penny?
I love the idea of families supporting each other, but I don't think that it's anything that the district should be a part of from the insurance standpoint of things. The buses need the buses to be the buses, the parents need to be the parents. If people want to set up separate groups and cohorts and different things where they coordinate, it needs to be something that's outside of the district. The district should not be a part of that, because the insurance liability, if I take my big vehicle with 6 kids and I get in an accident and the school board's on it, or the district, let me rephrase that, the district is on it, then it becomes a liability of the district. So families outside of the district that wanna do that, that's amazing. I think they should all work together. I help run kids from my neighborhood all the time, but it's something that the district shouldn't be involved in outside of the busing situation.
Just to be clear, my thought wasn't that we should be doing that. I was just thinking that, just talking about the fact that some parents are going to be taking their own kids, not that I would be picking up other kids or.
You're just talking about what Chris said, advertising the parents that have the ability to do that just to help them.
Yeah.
Okay. Any other comments before we vote? Again, we're on the staffing plan, 15 additional teachers, 7 additional custodians. Any other questions? Okay, Jamie, let's vote. Okay, the motion passes 9-0.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. Moving on to the discussion item. We talked a little bit, beginning of the meeting about maybe combining A and B a little bit. Joe, I'm not sure how you want to do that, but the COVID-19 report is our first item on the discussion agenda.
Yes, and I'll try to keep the COVID-19 report brief, but I think it is important that we cover it. Every single meeting we've had, I've given you a COVID-19 report that starts with the current status of our county. Our county is now up to 93 confirmed cases, 64 of which have been released from quarantine. So that's 29 active cases right now in Menomonie, or in Dunn County, I should say. That, it's very concerning. And just a couple weeks ago, in our burden level, we were more in the middle. And this last measurement, last Wednesday, it went up to moderately high. And the way the cases are growing, I would anticipate that it very well could be high, and it could be with increasing trend. If that's the case, we're putting ourselves in a situation where having in-person instruction, K-12, could be put in jeopardy. Now, that's a moving target and a moving measurement every single week. So what happens on August 1st doesn't necessarily dictate what's going to happen on September 1st. But I would say more than ever, it's important that people do what they can to try to keep themselves and their families healthy and safe. I have signed on with the other Dunn County superintendents endorsing some sort of face mask advisory from the county. Also, UW Stout and local businesses are working on that. And while I do think it's important that there are some flexibilities built in and there's acknowledgement that it's not going to be working for every single person, especially people who have medical accommodations that need to be considered. I think there's more that we can do as a community to be safe, especially the people who have been exposed to close contact. I think if people are very responsible and try to keep everyone in our community healthy and safe, I think our chances of reopening will be a lot better. An update on our school district itself, summer school. We did have summer school in July. We had virtual summer school, and it's gone really well. We had a high number of students participate, especially in some of the offerings, especially the in-person offerings, like we had the weightlifting summer school offering, and we just had terrific attendance. No issues that I've been made aware of in terms of any kind of spread of COVID or anything like that. Our free meals program has continued and will continue through the month of August. So we're really excited. We were hoping to have some in-person summer school offerings. However, we were not able to staff an entire summer school program. We are going to offer some programming for students with special needs, and some of that goes back to some services that were not able to be provided during the closure last spring. But what we're able to offer in August is quite limited. Reopening efforts here in the school district have gone quite well. I would say we're still in phase 1 in terms of having our offices open, and traffic has definitely picked up here in the ASC with people stopping in with questions about registration. Our principals have been conducting interviews. We had 33 applicants when we posted those extra positions, and we're very happy with the number of applicants, and now it's just a matter of making sure that there's a quality there. We're not gonna hire anybody to come in our school district work with our kids unless we feel they're top notch. So phase 2 is really what we're gonna spend most of the time talking about tonight, and that's planning for the reopening of school. We do have a planning team, as you all know. We've met, it's actually been weekly the last few weeks because there's so much to talk about. We had the surveys that went out, provided us with some very good information. We appreciated the direction that the board gave earlier this summer about doing whatever we can to open up for in-person instruction. I believe it was all 9 board members that supported that idea. We continue to try to apply the guidance that's been provided by the DPI, the Department of Public Instruction, the CDC as well. CDC actually came out with some additional guidance here in the last week, encouraging in-person schooling. So, that's where we're at now, is we're working on the plan. We're asking the board to review the plan tonight, provide us input, and we'd like to get the plan out to families tomorrow for their review and their input as well. We did have question and answer sessions, virtual question and answer sessions last week. I think it was close to 250 staff members were on a call for over 2 hours last Monday morning. And that was really nice to get that additional input and feedback from our staff. And then that evening, we had, again, over 2 hours of Q&A session with SDMA families. A lot of great questions. Certainly there's a lot of anxiety right now. People wondering what it's going to look like, not only in the district, but in our community. So I think it's very important that we continue our planning process and communicate our plans out as they become available. A lot of work has been done on the virtual school programming, and I'll cover that in more detail as we get to the reopening plan. And then I guess the other 2 things to mention, the WIAA had a board control meeting last week. Right now, schools are still planning to move forward with fall sports and activities. However, the start dates for all of those have been delayed. With football, I don't think you're going to see any kind of non-conference schedule, if we're going to see any schedule at all. There is an opportunity to push some sports to the spring, but it's really unclear what that means, whether it means that spring sports would then push to the summer, or whether it be just an additional opportunity. And if that's the case, I'm not sure how many schools will be able to field all those different teams, volleyball, track, football, all that stuff, if it gets pushed. So we're still working through that, and I appreciate the work that Mr. Mirren and his staff is doing. So we will share more about the fall sports as information becomes available.
Go ahead.
In regards to football especially, excuse me, being that we utilize Stouts Field, will they be charging us for those dates that we aren't using the field, or it's just going to go by the wayside?
The only game day charges really have to do with the waste removal. So I would not anticipate charges for games that are not played. Our agreement with Stout is more of a long-term comprehensive agreement.
Perfect, thank you.
Jim?
Well, we're on sports. What about other extracurricular activities where students are going and competing or whatever? They're looking at science Olympiad, forensics or whatever. What's the plans with those?
Well, those organizations, as far as I know, have not released any guidance. The WIA is the group that met, and the WIA, those sports activities really are the ones, for the most part, that start up before the school year begins. Most of the other ones start up after the kids are in class. So I'm certain there will be changes to things like solo, ensemble, and things like that, but I don't have any guidance to share on that today.
Just to add to it, the WIA, I believe, recorded their meeting with that. I think it was last Thursday. I had it on in the background. Some of it was interesting, some of it got pretty long and dry, but I know things are going to be postponed, and that was before some of these number changes and stuff too, so I know there's some flex to it, but it is recorded if you want to go on the WIA website and look. They did not talk about any extracurriculars other than sports.
Charlie?
Question, comparing the Badger bounce back plan to the Dunn County Healthcare, how does that compare? Have you ever talked with her about putting those two together? And the criteria seem a little bit different, but Can you compare them?
That's a good question, Charlie. I don't really know how to answer it other than I think that some of the data sets that are being followed are very similar. I think the thresholds that the health department has set for us are very helpful and very applicable to what we're looking at. I think the Badger Bounce Back Plan was more of a statewide issue, tracking statewide stuff. And I think that might be part of the reason why doesn't have the teeth that it did when it first came out, because we've seen that across the state it's so different. And for a while, Dunn County was extremely low, and to have Dunn County restricted, like you might be restricted in Milwaukee or Dane County, probably didn't make sense. But now that Dunn County's on the rise, I think there are some more similarities. But even now, if you look at what's happening down in the southern part of the state, it's nothing like it is here. When you look at the number of cases per 1,000, and so I do think we probably have more opportunity. A lot of those counties, you're seeing more schools go virtual than I think what you're going to see up here. And talking to my colleagues, especially west of here, New Richmond, Hudson, River Falls, I think you're seeing more schools in this area really focus on the in-person instruction with mitigation built in. Whereas if you go east of here, I think we saw a players plan last week, Altoona, you're seeing more blended type of plans. And then you go south and you're seeing a lot of virtual plans. So I think the importance is that we have options built in, and we'll talk about those here in a minute.
Your response was exactly the reason why I asked the question. Because there's some statewide groups that are using the Badger Bounce Back Plan as a reason to do or not to do something. The Badger Bounce Back Plan doesn't overlay really well with the Dunn County tracking, if you will. And as you said, we're so different here than in the east and southeast part of the state. It isn't really fair to us to compare the two. And that's what I was wondering if there's a way to overlay that, if you will.
And I appreciate what the WIA is trying to do, because here you have a statewide organization who's trying to make decisions and provide guidance for an entire state. I think just like some of the other guidance and such that essentially failed, I think it's very difficult for the WIA to do that. So I don't know if I like the lack of direction, but I appreciate the intent to provide choice and flexibility. But when you consider so many schools that probably aren't even going to have any kind of extracurricular activity going on this fall, it's going to be difficult, I think, to see that split. And that's where the conferences, may be really important. I know Mr. Mirren and the Big Rivers Conference athletic directors met last week, and I think it's pretty much a foregone conclusion that most of the non-conference stuff, if not all of it, is going to be canceled. We're not going to be sending our football team down to Holman, things like that. But if there are things that we can do more in our local community or in our local region and still provide kids that type of opportunity, it's something I'd like to see. I just don't know how feasible it is in some of the higher risk sports like football, for instance.
And again, I was thinking about it more from the educational point of view. It's not fair to compare us to the Southeast because things are just so different.
Right. The statewide superintendent organization has been trying to help coordinate some of that statewide information gathering through some surveys. And I was just reading that today, and I completed it. So you have about 3/4 of the state that is planning to open it in person. But, then you overlay the statewide COVID map and you can kind of see where some of that makes sense, because there is about 1/4 of the state where I think in-person instruction would not be advised. I'm concerned that with our numbers tracking the way they are, if, we're not able to get this under control, we could be there as well. The good news is that I think in Dunn County, even though our cases are on the rise, I think our health department has done a great job of contact tracing, and I think our demographics allows us to better understand where those cases are coming from. Whereas in some of the larger communities, there's just no way for them to really know where all those cases are coming from. We might be able to track ours to, a 4th of July event in a small community, or, a couple of graduation parties and things like that, which is still very concerning. But if you get to those people and contact trace it quick enough, hopefully you don't see that trend continue to escalate. All right, so Jamie, could you put the front page of the reopening plan up, please? And I want to show this off because I thought Jamie did a great job, and I also want to compliment my colleague at New Richmond, because New Richmond has a very similar graphic. And all the superintendents in our region have been just terrific in terms of sharing information and collaborating. And this is a lot for any one person to really work on. And we all have our planning teams, which is very helpful. But then to be able to make those comparisons between districts also is really helpful. So what I'm hoping, if the board gives the blessing tonight, I know it's not up for an actual vote, but I'm very interested to hear the board's input. What I'm hoping is that we can get this out to parents and they can start seeing what our plans are, and they can provide some additional input. And the opening graphic there really kind of just shows, some of the major parts of our reopening plan. Certainly working with the health department, our planning committee, the surveys that we had with our staff and families, the information from the Department of Public Instruction, focusing on students and staff safety, and then also a risk assessment tool that we are going through that's provided by the Department of Health. I'm not going to read this plan word for word because we will put it out, but the plan talks a little bit about what our goals are and things to people. I also want to thank Dr. Paul Horvath. He is a local doctor, and Rainey McMahon, our school nurse, has Dr. Horvath set up as our local medical advisor. So in addition to KT Gallagher at the health department, Dr. Horvath has reviewed this plan, and he also provided some input to make the plan better. The planning team has been terrific. We have representatives from every level. They've been very good at attendance at meetings and providing input. Some of them have received more input from their colleagues in their buildings than others, but I do feel like we have a very good system set up to get that input on a regular basis from our planning team. That includes not only all the principals and the administrators in the district, but also teachers and representatives from our hourly staff. The guiding principles for the plan, I think it's very important that people understand, kind of what the guiding principle, the purpose of the plan is. If the number one goal in our society was that no one got COVID, we would not be here right now. And there's no way we would talk about opening up schools. But we also have to appreciate that there's a lot of damage that can be done to the students and the children if we do not open up schools. This is a vital part of their growth and development and their ability to move forward with their lives and prepare for their futures. So it's a really hard balance, especially when you start thinking about the personal situations in all of our lives. But when we put this plan together, it's with the idea that if we're taking a student first approach, we need to understand that COVID might not be at the top of their list in terms of what's concerning to them in their lives at the present. But it certainly is an important part, as is the safety and well-being of our staff. That has to be a very high priority for us. And as the board talked about at our last meeting, we really need to focus on the science behind what we're doing. We need to rely on our medical advisors and certainly work in close collaboration with the health department. They really are driving much of what's in this plan. I mentioned before, this plan is designed to provide families choice and to have flexibility and mobility so that we're prepared as a school district to make changes as needed based on the circumstances in Dunn County. We're not only looking at educating in terms of academics, we take a whole child approach here in Menomonie, and I think this plan reflects that. Also considering the social, emotional, academic, physical, and mental health needs of our students. We felt it was very important that this plan was developed with input from families and staff. I think that has been accomplished, and I think we'll continue to seek out that input. And then it's critical that all families and staff understand, they understand the protocols and they understand the requirements, and that people do their part to follow it. There are sections about the overall goals. I do want to call out equity. That's one thing that I think can get lost pretty easily if people don't call it out. And we are looking at this plan in terms of equity as well. We need to understand that this plan needs to serve all of our students. So we do have a plan in place so that this entire plan, when it's finished, even though it's been ongoing review from all departments, we are going to have our student services department give it a final evaluation and really look for any ways that this plan might be inequitable. So Jamie, if you could now slide to the part of the plan that talks about the instructional model. And we've talked about this quite a bit over the last few meetings, but the model for our reopening plan really includes 4 major parts. One is the in-person learning, and that in-person learning would be offered pre-K all the way up through 12th grade. Then in the event that additional mitigation measures are needed, we would look at a reduced enrollment plan for grades 7 through 12. It would be a blended learning model where students would go to school some days and they would have virtual instruction other days. Services for students with special needs would also follow that model in some cases, but there could be some cases where that model would maybe need to be adjusted based on the individual needs of the students. If things continue to get worse in terms of COVID and in terms of what's happening in our community, if more research is done and we learn more about how COVID impacts children, right now the research, a lot of it is saying that it's not impacting children like it is some other demographics. There's a lot of reasons why, but in the event that we would have to go to a virtual setting, we would call that a safer at home learning model where everyone would be virtual just like last year, except we do have plans in place so it would be a much improved instructional experience, more synchronous learning opportunities where it's real time, the teacher on the computer. So for a student who enrolls in our in-person learning, they could anticipate having any of those 3 models be part of their learning this year, the in-person, the blended, or the safer at home learning model. We are also offering an online virtual school. That would be totally separate. That would be an enrollment. Actually, the information's on our website today. Message will be going out to families tomorrow, and people can enroll in our online virtual school. It's important to note though that it is totally separate and that a commitment to that virtual school would be an entire semester commitment. And it's not synchronous learning with a teacher on the other side of the computer. It's a curriculum that our teachers, we're hiring 2 teachers at the elementary level, and then there's other teachers that teach the online classes. It's content that is already developed, and those teachers help facilitate that online learning process. But the online virtual school is an option for all of our families and for kids grades kindergarten through 12th grade. That's a lot to start out with. I guess maybe we could pause and take some questions about the learning models.
I just have one quick, you talked a little bit about the level 3, safer at home learning, and the type of instruction and lessons that we've learned from last spring. Could you just elaborate a little bit on some of that, please?
Yeah, thanks for that question. Last spring, I'm really proud of the efforts that our teachers put in and our students and our families. I think only having really a week to transfer between a traditional learning environment into a fully virtual learning environment was a very tall task, and I think our staff was up to it, and I commend them for their efforts. At the end of last year, though, we gave a survey out, 3 different surveys, one to students, one to staff, and one to families. And we took those surveys and we really evaluated them to try to find out what we could do different in the future. And from those surveys, and I think Brian maybe had provided some of that information previously, probably the number one thing was having the synchronous learning. Last spring, there weren't enough synchronous learning experiences where the students and teachers were communicating at the same time. Also, there were a number of different learning platforms, and that was difficult for students and families to manage. So we are going to a consistent platform, Seesaw, grades 4K through 2, and then Google Classroom, grades 3 through 12. So it'll be a consistent learning platform. And then also with our schedules, the high school has totally revamped their schedule for next year. We're going to be going to a quarterly block schedule. And actually, I think Mesa had made some comments perhaps at the last meeting about some of the challenges students had trying to balance all those different classes. By going to a block schedule for this year, We will have the opportunity to have less classes for those students to have to manage at any one time. It also will be less classes for the teachers to plan for at any one time. That'll be very helpful in the event that we have to go to a blended or safer at home learning model.
Okay, other questions? Jim?
So with the three different, the in-person, the blended, and the safer at home, what are the specific criteria so people out there understand, okay, we're gonna have to switch from in-person to blended learning, because X number of people have COVID or X number of people in the county have it, the infection rate is at X. What are those numbers so people understand exactly when we're making those switches and why?
That's a great question, Jim, and that's actually the next section of the reopening plan. So I'll cover that, and you can always go back if people have additional questions about the specific models. The criteria have been set in working with the Dunn County Health Department. And right now, what we're tracking is the burden level of how many cases in the past 2 weeks per 100,000 people, and then also the trajectory and the trend. Is it going upwards, is it going downwards, or is it staying horizontal? And you can go into the Badger Bounce Back Plan and you can read more about that, or on the Dunn County website even. It explains some of the statistical significance to measure that trend data. But essentially, if we're at a high level of burden and we're at an increasing trend, that's going to be a situation where additional mitigation measures are going to be needed. Now, KT Gallagher stopped short of saying that the additional mitigation would have to require moving from one model to the next. I think some of that will depend on how much information they know about where those increased cases came from. For instance, I am very concerned once college starts back up and we bring a whole new population into our community, we could see a spike. But I also think the health department will have a pretty good idea if that spike is, located at Stout or some other area. We could have a major business that has a spike. And I think if it's a situation like that, the mitigation measure might not require us to actually move from model to model, but we will be ready to do that. But what I think you can anticipate, Jim, is that if the burden is high and the trend is up, there is going to be a conversation with the health department and me to discuss whether or not it's safe for our kids to continue being in the model that we're in.
Okay.
Just a couple of questions, and I don't need to go all over the board. When you say quarterly block, can you tell me again, how long are those block classes, and how many classes do the kiddos take?
The high school is built on a 7-period day. And the idea is that first quarter, they would have, let's say their odd periods, 1, 3, 5. And then in the second quarter, they would then have classes that were originally scheduled 2, 4, 6. There'll also be one skinny period, which is essentially half a block. And then the other part of that block will be their ELT, homeroom type of experience. So the good thing about it is the reduced load. The challenges about it, and I'm not a big block schedule fan, especially as a teacher and as a learner. I think those long periods can be very difficult for both teachers and students. Also, it will be difficult on continuity. Someone taking geometry, for instance, they may have geometry first quarter for a block, no geometry second quarter, and then geometry again third quarter in a block. So there's definitely challenges to it, but when we weigh our ability to have in-person instruction and our ability to keep our buildings open, we really felt that it was worth the challenges that we're going to have to overcome for 1 year.
So just to clarify, Joe, 4 classes a day with the block schedule?
Yes, 3 blocks and 1 skinny.
And then the duration, how many quarters in the year? You have 4. So you'd have a shorter time frame for each one, but instead of being a semester, it'd be a quarter.
Right, it'll end up being a semester because they'll have it again in the third. So if they have it first quarter, they'll have it again third quarter. We looked at totally scrapping the entire schedule and building a traditional block schedule, but we're just not set up to do that. We don't have the staffing for it. Our policies are all based off of an 8-period day or a 7-period day with graduation credits and all that. And we're still holding out hope that at some point this year we're gonna see some sort of normalcy. Whether or not that happens, I don't know. But we just felt that, the need of the flexibility required us to do this. So we will be in it for at least the first semester. Even if things were to get great in the middle of October, the way it's set up is we would need to complete that semester to ensure students receive all their classes. Ideally, we could go back to a traditional 7-period day, second semester, but that's, at this point, we're not looking out that far.
Good, Tanya.
Virtual school, so we had, I think if I read right, August 12th is the deadline. Is that enough time to really get a good grasp of how many kiddos will be doing virtual school, so then we can plan for less? Should we have a shorter amount of a deadline? What's your opinion on that?
Yes, and again, that message will go out tomorrow. I would love to have the shortest deadline possible so that we can hire and arrange our classrooms based on the class rosters that we know are coming. I just don't think that's fair to families though. Last week was really the most information that families have received. And this is changing a lot. I mean, it's changed a lot since March, but I would say in the last 3 weeks, it's changed a lot in our local community. So I think it's really important that we take enough time to give families the opportunity to make that decision, because we are asking for that semester-long commitment if people choose the online school. So I'm comfortable with the date where it's at. I think it's fair to families and still gives us enough time to make adjustments that may be needed.
And then just one left on virtual school. So in regards to high school, if their students participate in the collaboration with the tech or business management, they have to come face-to-face. They cannot participate in virtual school. Can you talk to that?
Yes, that's my current understanding, Tanya, is that some of the collaborative agreements we have with higher education would not be able to be accomplished in the online school setting. Now, those things continue to change, and we certainly are advocating for as much flexibility for our students as possible. But if that's a big part of people's plans, to be able to have those dual credit opportunities, or those transcripted credit opportunities, I would recommend the in-person schooling.
Not that I think that you need to ask us for permission by any means with changing to a different instructional model, but how do you envision that going to let us know if you're going to change it to something else?
The measurements that are currently coming out on Wednesdays. So I would anticipate that we would see a measurement on a Wednesday, and more than likely, KT Gallagher and I will be talking every Wednesday evening. And what I would hope is that we could get through that week and begin a different environment on Monday to provide parents enough time to make the arrangements they may need to make. I'm not gonna say that it's not possible that we would close that following day, especially if we get to the point where hospital capacities or there was a big morbidity issue that we needed to consider. The health and safety of everyone's gonna come first on that stuff. But I would anticipate that the previous Wednesday would make the decision for the following Monday. That's what I would anticipate. And you're right, we're not planning on having a special board meeting or anything like that. It's really a decision that is between me and the health department in terms of the authority provided by state law.
Mine ties in with that. The big question, the number one I've probably gotten is what threshold would trigger that? I know you kind of covered what criterion, but is there an objective hard number so that it's not Dr. Zadowski making the decision and it's on your hands as to when we transition or switch the model? So I guess I'll let you speak to that first. I've got a couple of questions.
Okay. And I know I went through this with families the other night, so I'll try to go through it a little quicker. But if you go to the Dunn County dashboard, and I wonder if I should just plug in, Jamie. Does that screw your computer up? Do you want to just give me the plug and I'll plug in? Or do you want to try to go to the Dunn County dashboard? Do you have it linked somehow? Maybe in my report? So this is the front page of the Dunn County dashboard, and you can see that this actually has 91 cases. You can expect to see 93 tomorrow based on what the Dunn County Health Department released via Facebook this afternoon. Jamie, in the bottom right hand, this is just a running total of all the cases. in the bottom right-hand corner, there's a little, right arrow. I don't think you can see it on the screen. Might be really small. Yeah, click that right arrow. And if you can make the screen a little bigger again. Okay, and then you're gonna need to get into that data table and scroll down to Dunn County if you can manage that. Okay, so the second page of the Dunn County dashboard has all the different levels, Clint. And if you go to Dunn County, you can see that in the last 2 weeks, this is from Wednesday to Wednesday, there were 26 cases, which is a burden level of 58, classified as moderately high. It was moderate in the week prior. So if that burden level goes to high, which it very well may based on the past 2 weeks.
So objectively, what's considered high, like 30 or 40 or what, at what point?
Oh, I see what you're asking. Okay,
They'd say high, but who's picking that?
it's defined, let's see here.
Must be a percentage.
I have it right here. So moderately high, which we're right now, is a case rate greater than 50 per 100,000, but less than 100 cases of 100,000 people. So they take the population of Dunn County and the new cases, and they give you a burden rate. So if our case rate is to be greater than 100 cases in the past 2 weeks per 100,000 people, that'll put us into that high category. Now the trend is a little bit more tricky. It's more of a statistical measurement, and I'm not going to give a lesson on statistics today. But if you look, let me get back to that column. There's a trend column, and it's either an up arrow, horizontal arrows, or a down arrow. So if our burden level is high and the trend level is increasing with an up arrow, then that's when we're going to have the conversation on additional mitigation measures.
So it wouldn't necessarily be a guarantee that we would switch at that point.
Correct. Again, a lot of that will depend on how the contact tracing has gone. You know, if people are forthcoming, or if it's, kind of isolated at a certain business or a certain area where people know where all these cases came from, and they're able to isolate those people quickly, you would then anticipate that things would go down.
You answered that question earlier, because another concern I had was subsets like university, or say there's a hotspot in Boyceville, Colfax, whatever. Does that affect the entire county? And that's already been answered as far as no, it would be specific to our community.
Correct. And that's one thing the superintendent's talked with KT Gallagher last week about, is that it's really not fair to us or Colfax or Boyceville or Elk Mound if there's an outbreak in one of those communities that leads to a high burden and a high trajectory to close us all down.
Then question number 2 kind of goes around the enrollment period. And I look at this as kind of like enrollment period for insurance, Medicaid, re-enrollment or whatever. Say a family decides to go live at the beginning of the school year, and then something changes, whether their third level changes or something happens in their family where maybe they've got an immune-compromised person in their family. Would they be able to go from live to virtual learning mid-year?
Not during
Not the other way.
not in the middle of the semester, but yes, mid-year, at the beginning of the second semester, there'll be another open enrollment.
So they commit to the semester and then they can't switch from virtual to live or live to virtual?
Correct.
Okay. And then my third comment is
Just a
actually,
second, Clint.
Just something I want to follow up on. How much of that is determined by enrollment dates in WBS? Because I know they have enrollment periods, right? You can't just plug anybody into a course at any time, correct?
Kind of correct.
Okay.
There is some flexibility, but kids have to start from the beginning of the course. And it would be very problematic for a student to, let's say, enroll in November. They would have to start back at September, and and plus the pacing with our teachers who are going to be supporting that program, it's just not something that is feasible.
Sorry.
that's fine, actually. And then you can actually take a deep breath and smile down, relax, because this is not a question. I like the options out there. I can't see how someone would dislike the plan we got going forward, because I think we're giving options that are gonna make everybody happy, at least I hope, so kudos on that. So,
You're very optimistic.
I like the options.
Amy,
My question is, I just want to make sure that I understand this. Okay, so pre-K through 6, be 5 days a week, if they decide not to virtual.
Kindergarten through 6,
Kindergarten through 6.
yes.
Okay. And then 7 through 12, that's gonna be where they're like 3 days, or 2 days, and then every other Friday?
7-12 will begin, if we were starting school tomorrow, 7-12 would be 5 days a week as well.
Oh, okay.
However, if additional mitigation measures are needed, then 7 through 12 would go to a reduced enrollment plan where they go every other day, either Monday and Wednesday or Tuesday and Thursday, and then Fridays will be used to balance the calendar. Ideally, the Fridays would rotate between the two different groups, but with the calendar, with some of the days off and some of the vacations, we'll map that out ahead of time. Or if we were to have a snow day or a canceled day, it's very possible that we could end up having a canceled day, whether it be not able to have any transportation throughout the entire district. I don't think that would be the case, but possible. Or in the event that we simply had too many people out sick, maybe not with COVID, but had some sort of allergies or some other cold that would not allow them to come to work. It's very possible we could have to cancel a day here or there. So those Fridays would be used to try to equalize the number of in-person days for those two different groups, 7 through 12.
Okay, and there is room to have a social distance?
Room for out of what plan? Which plan?
If all 7 through 12 were coming 5 days a week, okay, let's start.
Okay, so if we go
And
full,
there's room for them to socially distance them in all the classrooms?
if by socially distancing you mean 6 feet, the answer is no. And that's why if it gets to the point where physical distancing has to be more strict, where it is a strict 6 feet, then we have to go to the alternate enrollment plan.
So it's not strict right now?
Not a strict 6 feet. Now, we are gonna prioritize physical distancing all the way across the district, but in grades 7 through 12, it's not, some classrooms will be able to get 6 feet, but not all classrooms. And that's a discussion, and if the research has shown that 3 feet has many benefits, 4 feet has more, 6 feet has more, 9 feet's even better. 26 is ideal. Seriously, if someone sneezes or whatever, 26 feet, I think is what I read on something like that. So in the full enrollment plan, if school is to start tomorrow, the health department would let us open up knowing that in grades 7 through 12, some classrooms would not have 6 feet of social distancing. But again, if the numbers increase, the burden goes high, the trajectory goes high, one of the mitigation measures would be requiring 6 feet. And if we're gonna require 6 feet, then we have to go to the reduced enrollment plan, the blended learning plan that has 6 feet across the board.
Okay, then are they gonna be mandated to wear masks if they're only 3 feet apart instead of 6 feet apart?
Well, that's in here too, and I do believe that masks will be required, and that's our policy right now, is that if you're not able to maintain 6 feet in our school district, whether it be in the offices or in the gym, then masks are required, with the exception of people who have a medical accommodation or for specific activities that have a other mitigation plan in place because the use of masks is not feasible for that activity.
Okay.
is it, as part of the mask plan, I know there was some discussion that if we are able to maintain the 6 foot distancing, masks would not be required in the classrooms?
Right now, our policy is not to require masks when 6 feet can be achieved. We're still studying that in terms of what that's going to mean for classrooms. Some of the most recent documentation has come out with best practices for providing mask breaks. Where a teacher or some other person that might be supervising the children during a certain point in time provides a mask break. In my mind, that could be a situation where everyone's 6 feet apart and kids are doing silent reading. Or everyone's 6 feet apart and kids are taking a test and there's gonna be no verbal interaction. that we're still working on that, and that's why we've said, we're not ready to release, requirements in terms of what masks might have, for September. But we're also trying to see what our situation in the community might be. I have a feeling that if we were to open school tomorrow, the health department would tell us that masks would be required at all times indoors if we were open tomorrow, the way our numbers are. But that's a decision that we're going to make when we get closer to September 1st. But I would fully anticipate, and this is what I wrote to parents last week, masks will be part of our plan. It's just not detailed yet how much of part of the plan they will be.
Could they take a break and go outside too? I mean, like,
We are emphasizing the use of outdoor learning spaces. All principals have identified areas around their school. We don't want just, mass chaos where teachers are who can get to the shady spot quickest, that type of deal. We're actually gonna have, kind of a sign out process so that teachers can reserve certain spaces and try to rotate that through a little bit.
Do you think, Joe, there's any potential in individual classrooms where you have cohorts of students grouped together that might affect that policy as well?
We've talked about that a little bit, Dave. I think that's gonna be a challenge. That is one of the ideas, is that if we're not able to maintain the 6 feet, is there an opportunity for some students not to wear masks and be part of the room, and other students whose parents want the masks to be in another part of the room? We've talked about that scenario. It's pretty problematic, I would say, at this point, especially where our numbers are. It's something that we have considered though.
One more question before, if we did go into the plan that you have for startup at where we are right now, in-person learning, would that include social distancing at the grade school level with the additional staff that we're planning on?
Yes, and that's one of the things with these plans. We're trying to make them as mobile as possible. So that's why we're hiring some of those staff members right now. That's why you approved 15 additional teachers tonight, is we want to have this thing set up so that if we are directed on a Wednesday, that on Thursday or more likely the following Monday that we have to go to a different plan, we're ready to go. But also we're trying to get that 6 feet right now, which could allow for more flexibility with the masks in certain classrooms.
Jim?
So, I've got a checklist here that the DPI put on, I'm sure you're familiar with. A couple things on the list. One of them was identify staff who cannot, or choose not to be in school due to their high-risk conditions or age.
Jim, a little closer to the mic.
Sorry, thought I was talking loud. Identify staff who cannot or choose not to be in school due to their own high-risk conditions or age, and make arrangements for alternative assignments. Has any of that occurred? Kind of a staff health survey and figure out, like who should maybe be home working on online learning or something.
We have had a few staff members reach out and mention personal medical accommodations that may be needed. I know our HR director, Samantha Hoyt, has been receiving those. We certainly will provide reasonable accommodations. Having staff members out though, it may not be reasonable when you look at what that does to the students' learning and the undue burden it would put on the district to hire another person to be in the classroom. I can tell you that we offered the virtual teaching positions that we had. We had 2 vacancies for those. We offered them internally. We did fill one of them internally already. And even if it requires us to have to look at an emergency certification or something, we're willing to do that to try to help staff members out. We're gonna do the best we can to support our staff, but ultimately it's each individual's responsibility to make decisions and keep themselves safe as well.
Okay. Contact tracing, you mentioned it. How is that gonna work between the school district and the health department if one of our students or staff gets sick? Will we be making phone calls? Will they be? How's that gonna happen?
The health department is the one who will do the contact tracing, but we want to partner with that. We know that that's been one of the limiting factors in our county, and we've talked about that at some of these meetings, how when you look at the requirements on gatherings, Dunn County for a long time has been and still is in a better situation than some of our neighboring counties that have larger gathering limits. It's not just because of the burden that COVID provides in terms of the numbers, but also the ability to contact trace quickly. And with such a smaller staff in Dunn County, they are not able to contact trace in some cases as much or as quick as other counties. So that's why we're looking at cohorting. We're gonna be really limiting the number of mixing opportunities that we have with the students. And that's something that I failed to mention with the high school schedule. Instead of having those kids mix in the hallways, for each of those periods, by going to that block schedule, that's really cutting that in about half of the number of transitions we're gonna have. And I would anticipate students to be masked up during those transition periods. But like in the elementary schools, you're gonna see the specialist teachers, your art and your music, pushing into the classroom instead of having the kids all filter through that art room every day, or music room every day. So things like that will help with the contact tracing, because we're really focused on 15 minutes of cumulative exposure within 6 feet of someone. And if we can limit the amount of that, even if we have a positive case, we should have a situation where we could have hopefully as few or maybe even no students that would have had that contact for 15 minutes cumulative.
And isolation areas, have you identified those and kind of who's going to be running them, or is that how they're going to work?
Yep, that's in the plan too. Each building not only will have an area where students can receive health services, but there's also going to be a specific area where students who are showing symptoms can receive services related to COVID. So we're still working on the staffing plan for that. A lot of the Band-Aids and stuff, our clerical employees do a great job helping with that stuff. So I think our medical staff will be more focused on, I don't want to call it a COVID room, but essentially a health room for COVID related reasons. And I know like PPE, personal protective equipment, Ramey and Tonya, Ramey, our school nurse, and Tonya, the director of student services, they've already ordered and in some of the cases received the PPE items. The PPE for those rooms will look a lot different than what you'll see in other areas of the building.
And you said you talked about or were considering doing temperature checks and health checks with the buses, and that wasn't going to work. You talked before about doing it at school. Have you come up with any more specific ideas or plans on those?
Jim, the screening is probably what has changed the most in the last week. Initially, we wanted to do temperature checks and we wanted to do a bunch of screening right away before kids even came into the building. Then with the challenges with the infrared thermometers, first of all having enough, but also being able to use those in the outdoor elements, we ran into problems, and other people have run into those same problems. We were developing a plan to do screening first thing in the morning in the building, but now just today, more guidance has come out that really schools should not be doing those screenings, and it's more likely that those screenings will be done on a home basis, which will really require a marketing effort and a partnership with families. I think that's going to be very challenging. So we are still looking at the screening part of this. I prefer to have more screening than less screening. Even though it's a huge responsibility, I also think it could provide some comfort. In some cases, though, maybe a false sense of comfort with so many asymptomatic cases. But to answer your question shortly, is we don't have our screening procedures ready to go yet. We're still working on it.
Well, one final question along a different track. If we have people start opting out for homeschooling, how many can we lose before our budget falls apart?
Our budget will not fall apart.
Okay.
It does hurt our budget,
Yeah.
but I do not anticipate our budget falling apart in Menomonie.
Chris, Lenny,
Okay, I think we all appreciate the amount of work you guys have put into this, and the complexity and the ability to try and meet people where they're at is super commendable. I think that what is communicated here is not necessarily put in the best framework that really could alleviate some of the questions that I think a lot of parents and people in the community have. And so this is just a suggestion. But when you get into laying out, you put the different types of learning options. And after that, you put a series of thresholds that we cross, and then it alludes to changes that we made to the learning system. But it might be better if you lay it out according to like 3 different threat levels, so that people really understand that what we're doing is responding to a level of activity that we don't have any control over. But what we do have control over is mitigating the kind of reality that we're in. So if you take the first level that we're in, as threat level 1, we really can't get social distancing in our schools. So parents should know that their kids will be wearing a mask in school. So that's like straight up, that's basic threat level 1, and we have to do that. So I think a lot of parents would be really relieved to know that that's the reality that their kids are going to be going into. That because of that threat that we're in, that's going to have to happen because we can't maintain 6 feet of distancing except maybe during lunch and maybe during some outdoor gym activities.
I don't think that's accurate at all, Chris. I think in most of our classrooms, we will be able to achieve the 6 feet. And I think in most of our classrooms, that physical distancing requirement will be met. There will be some that will not be able to, and I would anticipate the use of face coverings in those situations. But I think what you just said is making a lot of assumptions that aren't.
That's what you just said. You said we won't be able to do it in 7 through 12. We don't have the classroom space to do 6 feet of social distancing in those classrooms.
In all classrooms. There will be some that we will be.
Not some. I'm just using exactly what you just stated. So when you're looking at like what our responses are, they're for real conditions that we can't have any control over. Like classroom size we can't control. And unless we have a number of students that are going to be doing the online learning, it appears that we're not going to be able to do that 6 foot distancing. And if we can't do the 6 foot distancing, then we have to do the masking. Because in the way in which we're looking at it, unless it's unfeasible to do the masking, if there's some mitigating factor, then we're going to mask. Yep. That's what we say. So it should be reasonable to expect that these kids, when they come in, are going to be masked.
I think
following
even,
your protocol.
I think even in the elementary schools, the kids will be masked when they come in.
Yeah.
And in the hallways, I think they'll be masked.
Agreed. So putting that out there in information because it's responding to a real credible threat, that would help parents understand what that school is going to look like. And that makes good sense, and it's going according with what you've done with Kiki Gallagher, and what we look at going with CDC. That's what the reality is for kids, just at for level 1. And then when you think about what the next level is, that's where we get upper trajectory, and then we get burden level all at the same time. And at that level, you can expect that we're going to be going into a mixed learning environment unless demographics, distribution, makes it possible that we don't have to do that. But more than likely, that's level 2, and more than likely, that's what's going to happen. And so being clear about that would really give parents a sense of what's going to be going on over the course of the semester. And then when you think of what that final step is, when you go into the way in which we see a complete online learning environment, that would be a burden that's at a threat level that probably goes on for 3 weeks, because that would have gone over the 2 weeks by which the students would have recovered from the virus. And once you have 3 solid weeks of a burden level that's very high, and you have a threat level that's been solid for 2 weeks, then more than likely at that threat level, we're going to have to move to an online learning environment. And so that's not changing what you guys have done. That just makes it more explicit. So parents can get their heads around, oh, okay, this is what it looks like. And frankly, when we look at like what's going on, and you've been pretty clear about this too, I mean, we're probably going to reach those. Like, I know we all hope that, but that's why it's really great you're giving parents the flexibility until August 12th to make the decision. Because right about that second week of August is when we're probably expecting we're going to see the reality, setting in for what that next semester is going to look like. So I think those are all great. All I'm suggesting is that you make a very clear statement about what our policies are in relationship to the threat level, that parents can understand, and they can be like, oh, okay, this is what the semester is probably going to look like if these things unfold the way which we think they're probably going to.
I think I like the idea of the threat levels. I don't know if putting in threat levels though are going to answer some of the unanswered questions that we have at this point.
Changes over the course of August, they'll be in a really good position to be like, okay, maybe it makes more sense for us to be all in an online situation. Which frankly, as Charlie brought up in the last meeting, that actually getting more kids out of the classroom might actually be kind of a good thing. Because we still have enrolled kids in the district. They're still going through our programs, but it also makes it more manageable in terms of what that day-to-day schooling looks like for the kids that have to be in there. And so in that kind of situation, it might be another way we should think about like what parents can do to help out the district in these kind of times that have never emerged before that we've ever faced. But it might not be a bad idea for those kids to be doing, if they can, an online learning, program, we have families that are working towards that, to get some of the bodies out of the classroom to make the whole thing more manageable for the district. That's the plan.
I do think there's gonna have to be some mobility in some of our policies and practices between threat levels. I think labeling things in a particular, not that they couldn't be moved, but I think labeling things in a certain threat level could be problematic, because I think our mitigation measures will continue to change based on what people are learning about COVID, which seems like every day there's something new. Also, what the health department is seeing in our community in terms of spread. I mean, hand sanitation is still extremely important, as is the sanitation of surfaces. But the amount of attention that's getting now compared to last spring is actually quite a bit different. And the attention now on the airborne and the use of masks and such is receiving a lot of attention. And I think as schools reopen, you're gonna see a lot of information too about when we're talking about kids. I think there's a lot of specifics to kids that we really have to focus on. So I think it may be premature to group certain mitigation measures in the threat levels, as you put it. Let me think about that some more. I know where you're going with that, and I like it. I also don't wanna give parents a vision in their mind of what things are gonna be when they're not gonna be that way.
One thing I'd like to add too, Joe, there are some intangibles that have to deal with students actually being in the classroom, and knowing that the district has a plan in place that if things get or start to deteriorate, we have options for blended program or at home learning. I think that should give a lot of families some comfort as well, because a lot of families that I talk to really want their kids to be in school, and want us to do as much as we can as a board and as a district administration to see that we can do that safely. So, Amy?
I see what Chris is proposing, and I think what he's trying to do is he's trying to make sure every scenario is covered. So parents understand that, that this could happen or could happen, and obviously we don't know until it's there, but I understand where he's coming from. The other thing a couple things I want to ask. So on the Wisconsin virtual school, that is that's the only, 7 through 12, that's the only choice they have, or will they have virtual school through Menomonie?
Well, it is through Menomonie, but we utilize the Wisconsin Virtual School curriculum.
Okay.
Well, actually, in 7-12, we also use instruction through the virtual school.
And
Whereas K-6 will be virtual school curriculum with Menomonie teachers.
Okay.
Overseeing facilitating it, basically.
And then my other question is, when it comes to somebody that's having symptoms of COVID, there's a lot of other things that have symptoms that could near COVID. So I think that you might have to have more than one room. I would hate to have somebody that has COVID with somebody that may not have COVID, and then they cross.
I agree, that's why we're gonna have 2 rooms.
Okay, that's all.
If you don't mind, David, it's like, when you were talking, it reminded me of something. I asked the health department last week, how do we answer the question that if it's not safe enough to have, a school board meeting with more than 25 people, how is it, or other public gatherings, how is it that we can have school and have 400 kids come into a school, even though the group sizes in almost all cases will be less than 25? And the answer to that I thought was really intuitive. The reason is that as a school, we're able to put in mitigation measures that cannot be relied upon in the general public. And that doesn't mean that people in the public, aren't capable, but we are able to have controls. We're able to have controls with our staff. We're able to have controls with our students, with visitors. We're able to put in all these mitigation measures. And that's why the health department is, with us on this recommendation of partnering with us. And that's also, I think, when you see the CDC come out and talk about the importance of opening schools, I think that's really the reason why. Excuse me. I swallowed wrong, I don't have a cold.
One thing too on the mask, I know nothing is set in stone yet on face mask wear and that in the district. There could be scenarios where classrooms that have greater than 6 feet distance between the students, they may not be wearing masks, or there may be instances in classrooms where everybody has a mask. And I know that's not, some parents would like an answer exactly how we're going to do it, but as a district and with the information that's coming in, we're just not there yet. Is that fair?
No, we're really not, but to be fair to parents, I would anticipate that masks will be a big part of our plan. I know that that's not popular with about half the parents that we hear from, but with what we know about the effectiveness of masks and the recommendations we're receiving from the DPI, from the CDC, the World Health Organization, I would fully anticipate that masks will be part of our plan. Me personally, I would really like to see an opportunity for students to have times during the day when the masks come off. I'm also concerned about our staff. I mean, our staff, not our entire staff, but I would say a majority of our staff have indicated that mask use is something that they think is important. And I want to support our staff on that. And we have to be able to staff our buildings too. And I do think that, not having a safe environment for staff members would be very problematic. One, perhaps we would lose some staff members that simply don't come back. Perhaps more problematic would be staff members that would be afraid and would not be able to do their jobs effectively. I do think it's going to be a big difference compared to what people are used to. I mean, well, obviously it's going to be. So I don't want to give people a false sense of uncertainty. I do believe masks will be an important part of our plan. I'm just not sure exactly the details of it yet.
Maybe think of this when you were talking about hand washing and stuff. Is there gonna be processes set up so when students go to lunch, everybody will wash your hands before they eat?
Yeah, actually each classroom will have a hand washing station, either a sink with all the materials that are needed or a hand sanitation station. If it's not in the classroom, it'll be close proximity to the classroom.
Tricia?
Is the district going to be purchasing the PPE for teachers as well?
Well, and actually I learned something when Dr. Horvath went through our plan. He said, make sure you call out cloth face coverings separate from PPE because it's not PPE, because it's not protecting you, it's protecting other people. That was just, I just wanted to comment. I learned that and it makes sense. But yes, the district, we've already received over 7,000 reusable face masks from the state. We also have some special masks coming for our staff members that will be distributed the first day of staff in service. And then, like the health room and some of the more specialized PPE, we have plexiglass barriers that sit on tables because we do have some staff members that provide special services, speech and language type of services or other services where there's going to be closer contact, or there may need the ability with hearing impaired students or hearing impaired staff members where that visual may be necessary. So we're trying to accommodate those types of situations as well. But yes, we are ordering and actually we received quite a bit of PPE and we'll continue to work on that. I'm very concerned about how the mask process will work because we unfortunately we have a number of students that they have a hard time coming to school and cleaning clothes, and then to think that they may be issued a reusable face mask, are those going to be clean? If they're not, is it that could be more detrimental to the student than not having a mask at all. So those are some of the questions, and that's why I'm hedging a bit on the 100% commitment to the masks. There's a lot that's being studied on that right now, and the other piece is that how they take them on, take them off, and where they set them when they're off. Again, I'd love to have an opportunity for kids to take masks off, but not if it's going to create a spread of the disease. So there's a lot to consider, and we are. It's July 27th, and September 1st is coming quick.
Chris?
Okay, and now switching slightly to the teacher side of what's going on. We've got one position,
Mike, Chris,
we've
please.
got one position that's available for a teacher in the middle school to move into an online learning scenario. But there's just been so much to do, I can't imagine that we've been able to, collect data on all the employees that have, an immune compromised situation or a new compromised situation at their home. Have we done our due diligence, or should we start on that right now, collecting that information to find out who's at risk so we can start trying to organize a way in which that we can create the same type of threat level for our teachers as we might from the disease itself. So what I'm saying is that when you say that this plan is built on equity, I believe that a lot of it is, but one of the most challenging parts of equity when you're facing a pandemic is people's immunity systems and how because I would really hate, we all know about my family situation. I'm teaching all online, I hate that, but I'm doing it, and I'm gonna make the best of it. I would hate to think that we didn't do due diligence and collect the information and supporting our teachers, and to find out that some tragedy happens in the aftermath, because their equity, wasn't taken into the account up front in terms of how we thought about our staffing and what that they look like. Right now, it's very student focused, and that's our number one priority. But our teachers are, we don't have them, we don't have any district. In many senses, they're the most important key to the whole process. And I'm wondering how we've created a system of feedback and data collection that helps us identify them before something happens.
So are you suggesting we collect medical data on our employees?
Well, only
And
only putting out on a voluntary basis that we're looking to help protect them during the course of the semester. And then if, like we did this at Scout, and we started it like a month and a half ago. Like if anyone has any mitigating circumstances, they need to get some medical documentation. And then I think as we found out from some of that union communication, it's not just that that's something that the school district can provide, but there's also on a national level, some ways in which that this population who is facing uncertain circumstances in a pandemic, that they're covered, but they may not be aware of. And so really making a concerted effort to reach out to staff and to know that we really value them, and that they're a really important part of this piece of pandemic planning too. I think that now is the go time on that. And it's just another layer of an incredibly complex and human situation where we want to make sure that we as a school board, that we're taking care of our people in addition to our students.
Well, we certainly, certainly will accommodate as much as we can. Unlike Stout, I would say the amount of accommodations we can provide in our school district will be much less. I mean, we simply can't have most of our teachers teaching online. It's great that you got that opportunity at Stout, but when we're looking at dealing with K-12 and adolescents or younger, it's a lot different situation. So I wouldn't anticipate near the amount of flexibility. I agree with the idea of sharing information and valuing staff, and I think we've done a great job of that. I think, like I said, we had a huge Q&A. We have staff members on our planning team. I'm certainly considering the health and safety of our staff and all the decisions that we're making. But you're right, it's a student-first plan. Like most things in our district, it is student-first. I know Sam is working hard to put together information for staff members about, the benefits and the opportunities that are available, but they are quite limited. I mean, just like, a hospital, there's only so many accommodations you can make for certain staff members. And while we would like to do that for everyone, it is going to be limited. I don't know, unless the board would like to provide some direction. I mean, do you expect us to create, online virtual work experiences for anybody who has a family member or themselves who has a condition?
Charlie?
I would say do what you can do reasonably. But like you said, we can't turn a third grade teacher, that classroom into a virtual classroom because that teacher can't teach. Like, at Stalt, they can say this class is now gonna be online. We don't have the ability to do that. Yeah, Chris, are you suggesting that there's people who are compromised somehow that are unwilling to come forward and say, hey, I need some accommodations? I would think if I were in that situation, I'd be raising my hand pretty quick.
Yeah, you'd be surprised the degree to which that people in Wisconsin, it's really a good state, people have a good work ethic. A lot of people don't want to get handouts, they don't want to have special treatment. And in many ways, that Wisconsin work ethic has come back to really consider those people that have been maybe left behind. So I would say I would never underestimate the ability of Wisconsin people to be like, we can just soldier through this and go to work and get it done. But more than that, I'm thinking that maybe we could be creative in terms of like, in the 7 through 12 scenarios, if there are some teachers that are facing more dire consequences, their risk of exposure to COVID presents itself, then there may be things like you don't necessarily have to do online learning, but a teacher could be giving a lecture or conducting a class in another classroom via technology that the students can then participate in. I mean, so there are other ways in which you could think about if there are people that have extenuating circumstances that we aren't aware of. That there may be some creative ways in which we can do some of the upper level courses. I'm sure the students would not want to have their teacher risking, their safety to have that in person. And I think it could be a better way of thinking about how we can all collaborate together to I'll make sure we all make it through, all of us. So I just would encourage that maybe we want to start thinking about how we reach out to our staff and our teachers especially, and maybe just that is a good step in the right direction.
Okay. In the interest of keeping things moving, Joe, do you have more on your reopening plan that you want to cover?
Well,
I know you've covered a lot of it, even towards the
Right.
end.
I guess what I really need to know is, based on what you've read, do I have your blessing to share this community-wide? And obviously understanding that it's a working document that's gonna continue to change. I would anticipate putting it on the next meeting agenda for formal approval. And I would anticipate some changes before then, but I think for the most part, it's pretty solid, it's been reviewed. So I guess I'm interested if I have your blessing to do that. And then if there are any specifics, like Chris mentioned, that the board wants the district to do.
Start with Clint and then Amy.
Yeah, there's a lot that goes into this. We're getting into the nuts and bolts of it quite a bit. There's a lot of questions have been answered. I'm sure there's some that are come out. I'd like to see us work on phase 3 before the end of the year, so that'd be awesome.
Amy.
I would just like to say that I appreciate the document, and I think that it's very important that it goes out sooner than later, because I think that was kind of the issue, and we're going to talk about that kind of in my next thing that I guess would be on the agenda. But what I appreciate is the fact that you want to send it out, because I really think that parents have had that before the parent meeting that could have mitigated some of the issues that came up in that thing, because I think they wanted more information. They were very concerned, I know, about virtual school and what it was going to look like. So, and then all of a sudden they were told they had to register this week. And they didn't know how to make that decision because I didn't see anything that showed what it was up. So to make a long story short, I think it's great that you want to get it out, and I think the sooner the better, because I think that will make parents a lot, easier to make sure that they follow or look at it and be able to make some informed decisions.
Thank you.
Comments, other board members? Chris and then Tanya.
Okay, so draft gets out, and then maybe consider doing some clarity on some of the, like we'll have, you said 2 weeks, we're thinking about getting a final copy out for the next board meeting.
I won't call it a final copy, but I would anticipate asking for the board's approval.
Yeah, so I think that sounds good, as long as we're very clear up front that this is a draft, and it's moving forward in ways that hopefully we can add clarity to the questions that are answered in the plan as it is currently envisioned.
Tanya?
On page 7, there was talk, special education came up a lot on the call last week in reevaluating IEPs. I think there's a 6 months clock that you have written here. So the amount of IEPs that we have in our district, is that enough time for the staff to be able to manage and have, I would assume, is it a formal meeting they would need to have back to the parents? Or that was my only 6 months feedbacks for the amount of kids that are on IEPs.
Tony's not here to answer that question. I can tell you that she drafted that paragraph, and she's well aware of what our requirements are, regulations, and our abilities. So I think I trust Tony's judgment of that.
Penny, Charlie, Trish, anybody? Charlie?
Just one final comment. I think this plan is very well done. I've seen many of these. I've talked with administrators about these. I think you've done a good job. I think you've covered most of the bases, at least that you can right now with what's known. So from my point of view, get it out there as soon as Amy said, as soon as possible.
I guess I'd agree with that too, Joe. I think that get it out to the parents and community, and we're gonna get feedback. Hopefully, that'll help us to fine tune it and make it better. Penny?
And this draft of the plan has already been shared in public public content today, so people can see what we're already working on and tweak it, make it work. It's a living, breathing document. It's not going to end with this, so.
Good point, Teddy. I appreciate that, and I appreciate that you did put it in the public, because when I saw it, you said not to share it with anybody. I was thinking, but don't these people have a right to see it, because they are the ones that are affected by it the most. So, but I appreciate that.
Well, but Amy, if you would have read it a little more closely, it said don't share the initial draft, but it also said the plan will be brought back to the board. Well, I think some of the verbiage was changed, but it was also shared that as of noon today, I think it was, that initial draft after Joe reached out to all of us, got our feedback, was going to be loaded into board docs for the public to see. So it wasn't super top secret, but it needed to be as prepared as possible so people weren't panicking ahead of time before we all had some input. And that's appreciated by me as a board member, that we were able to have input on this prior versus having all of the input today.
I guess I'd just like to add, from the school board standpoint, we appreciate all the work that you and the team have put. I know you've had weekends and nights and a lot of time put into this. And to the community, I will say, it's not perfect. It's not the way all of us would envision school being in an ideal situation, but hopefully we can make the best of it and at least have a good chance at a positive educational experience for our kids. That's important.
Well, thanks, everyone.
Okay, we'll move on to discussion item C, union involvement in the SBA. I don't know if Amy, if you want to start off. Sure.
To our meeting with the parents, and granted, where to get the information, it's hard to say. Social media travels quite fast. But I will say this, one of the things that I see, especially in Steve's letter, is that I don't see any statutes that prevent you from talking to the union. Just the fact that you would open it up to everybody, which I think was great. But the union had some good, ideas, and I know that in legality, yes, Act 10 took the union away, but it took more of the collective bargaining away and the salary. And so and the reason I think, that they're not certified is because probably our salaries are good. But just because they're not certified, I still think they can still talk about health concerns. Kind of piggybacking what Chris said about our teachers. They can still, if they don't feel safe or there's something that's not good with them, safety issues are legally able to be brought up to the superintendent. Other districts, and I know that even after Act 10, we had other superintendents like Chris Stratton and Dan Wall in there. Well, probably Chris Stratton because that's what immediately happened. I think was still not active when Gamble was here, but when Chris Stratton was here, I know she's still, would be with the union. And I just think it sets a precedence in our community and with our teachers as kind of a trust situation. And I guess I want to make sure that, even if you feel like you don't enough, and you have, in my mind, in some ways, but I just feel like it's kind of almost like dissing the teachers a little bit. And I just would like to see, some trust built and just, some ideas to at least let them know that they're heard. So I guess that's my spiel on that.
Well, and I appreciate you bringing that up, Amy, because I would like to respond to that.
Sure.
I actually had several teachers reach out to me and appreciate my response. And I was so busy answering questions, I didn't get to see much of the chat and stuff that happened during that parent meeting, but it's very disappointing to me that we did have a few staff members get on there and make it seem like I was trying to not listen to a group of teachers. And what I want the board to know is that I do appreciate that the teachers reached out, the ones who met, saying that they were the union. And I appreciate that they shared their ideas, and those ideas were considered in the Q&A and considered in this document. And I'm very happy about that, and I'm proud of that. I'm extremely frustrated that some teachers chose to circumvent the processes that we had set up. In fact, one of the committee members on our team does pay dues to the union, and did not have people reach out to him. And we've met several times, so to wait, the week before the plan goes in front of the board and pose ideas and questions, which were still considered, is very problematic. And I don't think it's a good way to operate a district, and I certainly don't think that the teachers who met and said they were meeting as a union represented the majority of teachers in our school district, even though I think some of the ideas were very good. And I guess, when I got the request, I did check with legal counsel. I shared that with the board. I also checked with the board president, and I followed the direction and the advice that was provided. I'm willing to meet and talk with teachers as much as possible. I spent a half hour Saturday morning talking to one of our teachers who had some real concerns about reopening. And it was a very good conversation. I'm glad we had it. But I do have a problem when people make it seem like they're representing our entire teaching staff when they're not. And I think that's unfair to the other teachers. And, but I'm willing to do it. Is that something the board wants me to do?
Tanya?
No, just to piggyback what Joe said, since there was no dialogue on here what was going to be talked about, I want to try to do my own fact finding and figuring out in regards to teachers union. So I asked a very respectful teacher, it's been years that she's been here, and was highly frustrated and angry, knowing that there was a group of teachers that were speaking on her behalf, and others' behalf, because just like Joe said, she had no clue, was never asked, was no opinion. So do I want you? Absolutely not. I think you did a fabulous job. There was a survey opportunity. Feedback from the same teacher, they have been given numerous times. They can reach out directly to you. They've been told more than once that they can email you about their admin if they would like to make sure that they have their answers. So my opinion, no. I do not.
I think you actually should have talked to them. I think it was very disrespectful. I think they did a great job. I don't think they ever claimed they were speaking for all the teachers. They were speaking for their union members. I think the questions they asked, everything on there was very valid. And you said you will sit down and talk with teachers, but then you wouldn't talk with this group. It almost seems discriminatory to me because they're part of the union.
Chris?
And
Oh, go ahead.
so, yeah, I think you should have, and I think it was wrong not to. And you probably should follow up by talking to them.
Thanks.
Chris?
Yeah, I would just second the fact that unions don't claim to speak for an entire organization. And nor did any of the communications suggest that that was the case. I think that when you think about this particular situation that teachers are in, they need a union probably more than anybody else because they're not working in a market environment. especially the way in which that teaching has taken a hit in Wisconsin, where we have 5% less people becoming teachers every year. That the union is a vital way to build camaraderie, discussion, and to have people vet ideas before they come to a Q&A at a town hall forum. So I would say in addition to, I know that the Chancellor at Stout has been meeting with us and it's been super productive. And I can honestly tell you the discussions that we have as a union, it builds like an awareness of other people's reality that just doesn't happen in the institutional structure. You need to have a dialogue that operates outside of the structure of the institution itself to build that kind of solidarity. And another thing that it does is that it helps build common purpose in ways that help see the struggle of education as something that is happening across the state. It connects teachers with a cadre of professionals that's invaluable in terms of how that adds dignity to themselves and their voices and how they go about doing what they do. So I don't see any problem with meeting with a union. And I don't see that, as Bill well suggested, that they misrepresented what they were doing or why. I think what you stated was that they didn't give you enough time and that they came a week before the meeting with the school board. So I would reach out to them and say, I really appreciate the information and the goodwill that's behind this, but I need more time and discretion to be able to handle the discussion going forward.
Joe, you want to respond to that? Anything on Steve Wild's letter?
Oh, Steve, sorry.
Just that I think you need to think of the entire staff, and I don't disagree with some of what you're saying, but I also think that, well, I know that some teachers have not even been asked to be part of the union. I also know a number of teachers had no idea that any of these kind of discussions were occurring. So in my mind, it's very exclusive. Teachers can have anybody talk for them. I mean, that's their prerogative, and I think we saw that in the parent meeting. You know, there were people, there's even a student that, you know, asked some questions about the union, and it concerns me how people perceive a smaller group of teachers as representing the entire teaching body. And I think it damages I think it damages the teaching profession overall. I think it damages our school district, and I think some people should really think twice how they're representing themselves and their colleagues.
They never claimed to represent the entire school.
Penny was next.
I come from a universe where you are your own best advocate. I love it when teachers speak up for themselves individually. If they choose to be a part of a union, that's great. And I'm going to come back to the letter that was presented to us. The Menomonie Education Association in the interest of students, staff, families, and the school district, not Menomonie area, and it goes on. And they made some really good points. But they made it look like they were representing everyone. And as Tanya has pointed out, as Joe has pointed out, as I've had it brought to myself from some teachers that I truly respect, they were not representing everyone, or many didn't even know that this happened. Our teachers have had, and not just teachers, paras, janitors, food service, everyone has had so many opportunities to come to the board, to sit in on Zoom meetings, to go to their administration in a building level, their upper ups, to go to Joe, to go to anyone. They need to be their own best advocate, and I disagree with you meeting with the union.
Amy and then Charlie.
Just like to say that one thing that I did when I first got on the board was I went down to the union offices before, at 10, obviously. And I asked, what is the deal between unions and administration? Because I always felt like there was some adversity between those. And I always felt, why? Why? I mean, here's another group of people that are trying to, share like more hands on deck kind of thing. And the other thing I'd like to say is there's a lot more people involved in the union than you would think. I would think there's a lot more on the union than just the chosen people. I don't know how many, I couldn't tell you, but I'm guessing there's a lot more than what you think, that's all.
But that's a good point in itself, Amy. No, you don't know how many. and I don't know how many either. But the fact is that if they're a certified union, they would have at least 51% of voting members vote to be part of the union, and that's not the case. So if they were a certified union, it would be a different story. They're not certified. I don't think they've even taken a vote, as far as I know, the last few years. And again, my priority is the entire staff. And the processes have been in place. We've been working on this for a long time. And I think all staff members deserve to have a voice, not just some.
Charlie?
A couple of things. First, Amy, when you said that you felt that Joe was dissing the teachers, I think that's just a misstatement because of the meeting that took place with all teachers that were involved, not a select group, but I just think that dissing did not happen. Whether they said they were representing the whole district or not, it's certainly implied when you start talking about a union. And in their letter, they say, we continue to operate as a collaborative union. That kind of says it there that, that they're trying to put themselves out there as a large group. I don't know what they are, as you don't know how many there are. And I don't, the district and the directors and the administration talk with the teachers as those teachers wanted to participate, they had a chance to do so. I don't think that going beyond with this particular group is necessary, and I think I would have personally counseled against it.
I'd like to respond to Charlie. Maybe dissing was a little strong, but I just think the trust issue, to me, is just huge.
Trust with who, you mean?
With teachers, I just think that when you, I just get the feeling that, that when you do that, it's causes some irreparable damage to our teachers.
See, again, we're lumping teachers in this large group. And I think it's more hurtful for trust to only communicate with a small group. I think it's important that every teacher has a voice. And that's how I think you build trust, is by providing opportunity, multiple opportunities for all staff members to contribute, not just a select number.
And I guess my main concern also was that there really is no legal reason that you can't talk to the union. I guess I wanted to get that out. And even Steve's letter to me was pretty weak in the fact that he didn't have any statutes or things to say that you couldn't talk to the union.
I don't think anybody said I couldn't. It was advised not to.
Okay, and then also, there was just some contradicting from what the union rep said compared to, what Steve said, or what he said. Yeah, is all.
Chris?
Well, I just have to go back just briefly. It in no way says that they represent all teachers. You guys keep saying that, but it doesn't say that. If you guys can't read, that's on you. No, seriously, it's not fair to take a document and twist the words that are in there. And when you say collaborative, that just means that they want to work together with administration. That's what collaborative means. That's what they tried to do. So I'm not saying like you have to meet with everybody, but did anyone disagree with anything that they put in here? Not really. It was good people doing hard work, trying to advance the interests of their membership. That's it. You can't twist that and pretend that it's saying something else. It isn't. It's a union with their members that have some concerns that they put forward extremely respectfully. They did work that none of us had done. And to twist that and say that they were pretending that they represent all teachers, they never said that. In no way did they say that you should work only with them. That's also a misstatement. It never said you have to work with us as the voice of teachers. It was in addition to the work that had already been done. And by refusing to meet with them, I don't know why you would ask Steve Weld anyway. It's not a legal question. His opinion should not have been whether or not you should meet with a union. It should be, is this legal or not? And that's it. So that letter was problematic, and he often overstates what he's asked to do. And this is not the first time this has happened. So I like all you guys, but you can't take a document. Like, I'm a historian, we read documents. We don't have like our own agendas. We don't state any more than what is said in the document. And you, by stating that they pretend to stand in for all teachers, that's not true. And to pretend that they're trying to create a sole vehicle by which they're the only means by which you talk to teachers, they never said that. They said they were collaborative. That means they work with us. And by rejecting them with false reasons that misstate what they said they were doing, that's problematic for us as a body to do that. So I'm very disappointed in the tenor of the discussion that's misrepresenting a group of people that seem to be really nice and that really care about education. So,
Don't you think it'd be a good idea, though, if people care about education, to participate in the process instead of circumvent it?
I don't see how this circumvents it. You keep on, like, creating something that didn't happen. Like, I'm not mad.
They're not creating anything.
Yes, they didn't circumvent anything. They came to you with a letter, a document, they wanted to meet with you.
And that is circumventing the process.
No, it's not.
No, it's not.
Not
You're
even
an idiot.
remotely.
They respectfully approached and asked for a meeting. That's not circumventing anything.
Okay, I'm gonna call on Charlie.
And when they asked for that meeting, they were told the process is, we're going to have a meeting with everyone. So no one said that they couldn't submit what they submitted. I agree with you, this is good stuff. You said earlier, they did work that none of us did. Totally disagree. The administration and the directors have answered most of these questions in that plan that you read earlier tonight. So no one said we won't talk to you. That didn't happen. They had their chance, along with all of the other, however many teachers that are not a part of that group, to voice their opinion.
That's not the issue. It's misstating what they claim to do and how they're going about doing it. No problem. I think Joe probably will meet with them in the future. If they do good work and give them ample time, I think he said it was a timing issue and felt it was disrespectful. So I'm sure we can mend this bridge and make it happen in a future date, but to have people misrepresent what they're planning to do in order to, like, disparage unions and what they're representing and how they're going about doing it, that's not okay.
I think the issue with myself, and maybe some of the other, I can't speak for anybody else, but for myself, is not working through the system that we have in place already. So they have an opportunity to provide input. The staff has had multiple opportunities through the chain of command, through emails to their superiors, all the way through. And I think by them going outside of that opportunity, creating a document that a group of teachers put together with the union and bringing that in is what I would say is circumventing the process. If they took that same questions as teachers, if they have individual questions and preparing a document and work within the structure of the system, none of us would have a problem with that at all, because they're treated then equally with equality of any other staff member in the district as far as how their questions are addressed and answered and brought to the administration. So.
But by not responding, you're not treating them equally with every other person. You're actually taking this this group of teachers and saying, we really don't care about you. That's exactly what you did.
No, that's not at all, Jim.
Yes.
All that I said is I care about all the teachers, and that if certain teachers want to have the union speak for them, that's their choice. But I'm not.
You won't listen to them.
I listen to them. I met with all the teachers, and I'll continue to do that.
Clint?
Joe, was this subset allowed to participate in the town hall meeting?
Yes.
Exactly. To me, this seems like classic gaslighting again. They were allowed to participate with the rest of the teachers, speak for themselves, or they could have had a representative, an attorney could have been on that town hall representing them. And there was no problem. This to me, again, seems like just another way to stir things up and gaslight the administration.
That doesn't make any sense. They wrote a letter and asked for a meeting. That's not gaslighting. That makes no sense whatsoever. That's absurd. Like, you might not like unions, and that's okay. And you might say, I don't want to work with unions as a board member, and that's okay, but be upfront about it. Don't misstate what they did. That's crazy.
We can't hold it. Stop, please. Stop. I think as a board administration, each one of us cares deeply about our staff and the entire district. And to say that some of us don't is a misstatement. So I think that, if we don't have any other comments on it, I don't know, Joe, do you need direction on how to handle this or to go in the future?
Just unless the board wants to direct me to do something different. And I hearing mixed messages on it, so.
You guys wanna do a show of hands or what do you wanna do? Chris?
Can we just describe exactly what the problem is? Like, is it just that you said you will meet with them, and you meet with any teachers? So if that's the case going forward, I don't think we have a problem. If they had come to you with ample time, you would have met with the union, and you would not have given them any more weight than any other voice of any other teacher. If they're working within the confines of the way in which you said you will talk to any teacher, you will meet with any teacher, if that's true, then why wouldn't you meet for a group that would not have any more power than any other voice? But this would be representing a concerted collaborative effort to try to help or improve the district. I don't see a problem. It doesn't mean that they have to have more weight just because they're in a union. But the union does have the advantage of making collaborative efforts where you can bring together a number of interested voices to give another opinion on something that then you do something with. I don't see a problem with that.
I don't plan to recognize any non-certified union unless the board directs me to.
Tanya?
Amy, what do you want to get, since you're the one that brought the agenda item, what would you like to get out of this?
Okay.
And along the same lines,
I don't know.
I'm not done talking. Along the same lines, that really leads into when we add agenda items, it would be more helpful to have some sort of feedback or what the point of the topic is. Because since Thursday, many of us wasted a lot of energy and time to try to manipulate or figure out or brainstorm, what are we going to talk about? So then I feel like I came here not properly prepared because I didn't know what was coming. So when we get messages like this, that board member brings X, Y, Z to the table, if we can have some sort of data or some sort of the goal or what you'd like to discuss, or not just you, everybody, would be extremely helpful. The vagueness just ends up, and I will be honest, I go and start fact checking and it ends up being my opinion. So it's just more, if we can put it in a way that we can understand what was going to be discussed, and if there's a goal, what's the plan of this, or what would you like to see done?
Okay. So to respond to Tanya, I appreciate that. And, maybe I should have said it more, but I will say this, I did send an email to Joe, and I can send that to Joe to send out to all of you. I did send one to Joe and David, probably 2 weeks ago, about my concerns. Well, not 2 weeks, it was a week ago that they had the meeting with parents and I sent my 3 top concerns from that meeting, one of them being the union. I didn't get a response from either Joe or David. I figured it was because they were busy. Okay, and I don't even remember if you got that or not. Remember that. If not, I can resend it. Okay.
Sorry, I'm looking at the email right now, and it looks like Amy, you sent it Thursday, July 23rd at 5:07 PM. And it looks like Joe responded to you. Hi, Amy, do you have any background you want to include?
Okay.
This
Okay, that's a different email.
Okay.
Thanks for clarifying that. That's a different email. The email I wrote was like the day after, it's Tuesday. I thought about it all day, and then I wrote all my 3 concerns. One of them had to do with masks, one of them had to do with the fact that these parents don't know what virtual education looks like. We need to get that out there so they can make a decision without having to register so quickly. And then the other one was about the union. I never got a response from either of you. So that could have been included in this too, and I probably should have said that, Tanya, thank you. I probably should have included that in here, should have asked you to include that in.
Any other discussion?
Don't look at me like that, Dave. Okay, so it's come down to whether or not we think that Joe should meet with an uncertified union. So should we just make a vote on that right now as a recommendation for him? Is that what you're asking for, Dave? Was it show of hands on something? And then we know how that's gonna go, and then we can move on to the next topic of discussion. I will argue with you guys all day long if you're gonna misrepresent what is said in the document or what these people are doing. But if it just moves to a point where we're doing a point of order, which I guess is a motion, which we're like, should Joe meet with an uncertified union? We'll do a show of hands, take a vote, and move on.
If I had to frame a question, it would be, would the board prefer that staff work through the current process? Or should we have instruct our administrator superintendent to meet with a group of teachers that outside of that process? That's how I would frame that.
Go ahead.
It's probably not a yes or no.
It's not.
It's kind of too different.
Yeah,
Sorry.
Charlie?
To Chris's point, if we're going to do that, I'm not sure that the meeting that we're in and the way things were posted and all of that, that's even legal, but if we're gonna go there, do we want administration to meet with directly an uncertified union? I think that's really Chris's question. If we're gonna go there, let's go there. Can we? I guess it's a greater question. I'm not sure the answer to that.
Our attorney advised us not to, is that correct, Joe?
Not for any particular legal reason.
There was no legal reason at all in there.
There is no,
It just says,
except collective bargaining and salary.
He advised that there's no legal reason that we would need to meet with uncertified union. And I guess my concern from a district standpoint is that how many parallel processes do you want? You know, when we talk about our strategic plan, do you want us to talk to all staff, or do you want us to talk to people who say they're part of a union? You know, I mean, you could go on and on and on about all the different processes we have here, and, you know, it'd be creating parallel processes, which I will do if the board directs me to.
I still think it's important that staff work through the current process the way it's set up. We have provided ample opportunity for staff input, questions. If we need to do another Q&A with staff down the road, I don't think that would be an issue, but I just think that the opportunity has been there. Even this group that came up with the questions, with the union questions, they could have, as Clint or Charlie pointed out, could have been asked that evening during staff time or on the Q&A document and been answered that way as well. I guess, Joe, I'll ask, what do you need from us?
Well, my plan is not to meet with a non-certified union unless the board directs me otherwise. So if you want to put that on a future agenda or something, you could. But based on the legal advice I received and checking with our board president, that's the decision I made, and that's the decision I'm gonna operate under unless directed by a majority of the board, which I certainly will follow.
Any input? Okay,
Discussing this here, if it comes up again, we'll discuss it again. But if that's the operating procedure, that's fine, unless we come up with an agenda later.
okay, item 4D, changes to student handbook for 2020, 2021.
We have had a number of discussions about current school rules and policies that may need to be looked at in terms of our reopening plan. There's been discussions about uses of lockers. That's just one example that comes to mind right away. But even like the bell schedules, I mean, you guys approved the handbooks we brought to you, and we don't have the handbooks sorted through and figured out. Basically, I'm just giving you notice that I'm gonna use my pandemic powers and working with the principals and our staff and make changes as needed. One thing I will say is we will put those changes in writing, and we'll be sure to communicate those to families and to the board. We'll do our best we can to try to align those changes with the mission and vision of the school district. And like other things that we've had during the pandemic, certainly if board members have concerns or questions, we can always bring it forward for a formal vote. But I didn't want to operate knowing that we have a lot to do here in the next few weeks. I didn't want to operate that way without at least publicly telling you that that's one thing we're going to have to do.
Is that gonna be primarily like an addendum or something, not fully integrated, just because it's gonna be on the fly in the end?
Yeah, that's a good idea, Clint. I guess we haven't even got that far to determine, but an addendum, kind of like the employee handbook addendum, seems to make sense. Thanks for the idea.
Any comments from anybody? Okay, moving on. Item E, 4E, telling our story with philosophy. I don't know, Amy, if you want to talk to this a little bit, or Joe, we'll go for
Actually, I can just say that I started it. As you remember, I did the template, and I think you got to see it several meetings ago. I don't remember when it was now, but you got to see it. And then Joe just went ahead and cleaned it up and made it into a letter. Took out some things and probably added some things that were important. And he asked me to look at it on Tuesday. I approved it and said, I think it's great. Bring it to the board.
Thanks, Joe, for doing that. Any comments, Andy? Any comments? Thumbs up from Chris. Charlie?
Quick question, do you plan on sending it as is, or is this a draft for?
I would say this is a draft, and I think if the board's going to sign it, then I think we should put it on the next agenda to be approved. Amy, do you think that sounds reasonable? And then, you know, if board members have additional feedback between now and then for some changes, we can always do that.
My only comment would be, I'd like to see the broadband access beefed up. I just think that's so important and something that has been neglected in this part of the state, and the legislature has punted that down the road a couple of different times.
We could do that. In fact, I think this board, I believe, approved a resolution for the counties, and that could be referenced in there as well. Thanks for the idea, Charlie.
And I've also written personally about broadband. And I know there's some legislators in our community area that are working on that because it really affects us a lot in our rural areas.
Tricia, sorry.
I might have been misreading this, but Charlie sparked my memories about when I first read through this and about the broadband. Like, it is absolutely something that needs to be emphasized. And then it goes into this paragraph that says, despite the challenges with broadband access, teachers in the SBMA were phenomenal. And I think that absolutely they were. I'm just concerned that we're like, oh, but we were able to do everything okay. This, you know, we definitely have a broadband needs, but we were able to make everything work. And so not that, again, I don't want to take that out necessarily, but I do think that there needs to be more of an emphasis.
The tone is almost more like, here's the great things we did because of the problem. Instead, it's more like, here's how this problem impacted us. And maybe not even, you know, maybe include some of the stuff we had to do extra because of the problem. That, okay, I think I know where we're going on this.
It's still affecting some of the teachers today. Some of them couldn't come to school because, and when they needed to for access, there's some that don't have access at home. Some of these teachers that, for things that even do during the summer that they need access for and are not able to participate in very well. So it's.
Well, if anybody else has any ideas, please feel free to email me and I'll do another revision for hopefully board approval at the next meeting.
Could I just throw something out? What Chris said you got that letter from Margaret Reich about how we're always losing money to vouchers and other schools. It would be nice to just, I don't know if they make the letter too long, but just, it'd be nice if that ended and that there was a separate pot of money for all of the charter, voucher charter type schools and all of that. And they came out of a separate pot of money instead of the PPI budget.
Would board members like stuff about private school vouchers in this letter?
Well, you know that I would.
Remember, the intent of this was advocacy for great things that we're doing, not necessarily begging for more money. So I think I'd weigh that before the voucher thing. I'm with you guys on the voucher thing, I really am. But the WASB correspondence was, in reference to this kind of a letter, was more about advocating for the wonderful things that schools have done, maybe a time later to go to the money, the person.
Well, we're listing the wonderful things we've done so we can get more money.
I understand that.
That's the point.
I understand it completely, but worded in a different way.
I agree with you, Charlie. That maybe a clarity would be really important on this, and then maybe we should think about making our own letter about the voucher. She was only going to go for a separate time and really do make us stand. I think we all are on the same page on this one. So that would be a really good opportunity today.
So hold vouchers for our advocacy when it gets to the budget process. I think that's smart.
That's a good idea.
Okay, Moving on, policy 113, non-discrimination in district programs, activities, and operations, first reading.
So actually, Dave, if it's okay with board members for the interest of time, I'm gonna group the next three items together.
It's okay.
And I want to give kudos to Sam, Samantha White, our HR director. She's done all the work on this. I mean, I think I answered like 2 questions and everything else Sam did. This is off the WASB policy guide template. These recent changes to Title IX requires us to put in additional processes in our school district related to discrimination, related to harassment, and things like that. So Sam has done all that. She's met the legal requirements. This is just a first reading, so what I'd like to do is have board members look at this, and if you have any specific questions or concerns, you can ask them tonight, or you could get back to me and Sam and I. Sam and me. I don't know, Chris, you're the professor, let me know on that, but, I was being funny. I wasn't ripping you. Let us know if you see anything that you think needs to be modified, and then we'll have it at the next board meeting as well. Anything tonight?
I thought you were reading a children's story.
I know. I think I was. I'm getting tired.
Does anybody have anything on this policy that they want to talk about? Okay, review extracurricular staff requests, we have none. Items related to next meeting date, board committees and reports. Our next regularly scheduled meeting is August 10th at the ASC here at 5:30 p.m. Anybody else have anything to add? I know you had a couple things at the start as far as training opportunities and that. Okay, let's take a 5-minute break and then we will go into closed session after that. Thanks, everybody.